Okay, so we can see.
So if there's somebody speaking, we'll just.
Yep, let me see if the ears are on.
We started this just so everyone's.
It saves a lot of time.
Nice to see you. How are you? Always good to see you. Yeah, please. Yes. They may ask some questions, but we'll be good. No problem. I'll bet you.
Here to support.
That works.
How's it going, George? Very well. How's Elvis? Good, well?
How are you? That's something. Good seeing you. Yeah. 2 weeks. I'm actually great. Okay. That's all right. You never know.
What's that? You know what?
Oh, then I won't tell them. I won't tell them. Yes. I know comments, so.
We're good.
Thanks, Ed.
More than happy. I like my
Hi everyone, welcome to our August board meeting. Can everyone rise for the pledge of allegiance?
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for
is if we can start with the Terrace report. We'll wait till you have, get some cookies going also. I can just, if we could, so for expediency purposes, if we could do that. Madam President? Super. It's been a while since you've been with us, but at least to a board meeting. I know you've been in the district a lot.
Absolutely.
So basically, what we had asked is just an update for the board and for the public in terms of the Alcaraz activities over the last couple of months, plans for the opening of school in the coming year. And again, we have been so pleased with our relationship with Alcaraz in terms of the level of support that we receive, the questions that are answered quickly, the training, the feedback that we receive on the training has been outstanding from our staff, from our administrators, and we appreciate an opportunity for you to be with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you, board. My name is Brian Shanahan from Altaris. I'm the Senior Vice President. I've been working directly with the district for several years now. Trufo is my direct contacts. We will speak many times during the course of the school year, not just with our training sessions, but anything that comes up in 24/7 consulting service. So if there's any questions, concerns, even anything involving media, we have a direct line. We communicate quite often. I know we're moving the needle past COVID, hopefully, fingers crossed, and as we get back to somewhat of normalcy, even though we dealt with a lot of modifications over the last year or so, we still did a number of training sessions with the buildings individually and the district as a whole. Just to update you, we worked with the district, updated district level plan to make sure we're in compliance with New York State, to make sure if there's any changes, modifications that were right in line with what New York State requires. That was reviewed by the team and reviewed by the district office as well. Each of the buildings have their confidential building level emergency plans. Those were all updated and reviewed with each building, and each building, not just with each building administrator, but with each building team for their review and any modifications that were necessary, again, to keep us in compliance with New York State. Some of our training sessions this year revolved kind of around some of the major incidents that occurred. Lessons learned, how we're doing things here very well, and how we might be able to look for any improvement opportunities moving forward as far as tabletop sessions are concerned, working with each of the buildings. I was able to personally come and attend several lockdown drills and evaluate those and work with each of the teams to make any recommendations there. They're doing a great job when it comes to each of the buildings. And we also discussed, as we've seen in the news a lot of times, is the social media threats that we've seen, and best potential reaction, best way to handle those, and how we would handle those both in protocol nature, but how we would handle them in terms of should anything be affected in our buildings. And that collaboration has been a lot of work with collaborations with the Nassau County Police Department, many school districts in the different precincts, as far as those social media threats are concerned. Moving forward, we're going to continue to do the great work that each of the buildings are doing. For the 22-23 school year, we're going to continue our tabletop scenarios based on any events that have occurred or any situations that have happened throughout the country. Work on our threat assessment teams, and work on good threat assessment trainings when it comes to each of the buildings, and their approach when we deal with any of those kind of situations. Continue to work with our drills, and I'll personally attend several drills at each of the buildings. Again, make sure we're in compliance with the protocols necessary for the New York State Department of Education. And one of the things we really want to make sure we're applying is, as I said earlier, each of the buildings have a building level, a confidential building level emergency plan, to take some of the annexes from those plans and apply them to some of the tabletop scenarios so that we can continue to make sure everybody on those teams, those emergency response teams at each of the buildings, are very familiar with what are in those plans, and their reaction, their ability to respond if necessary, dealing with any type of emergency. As we've seen so many times, the more common ones that we see are smoke conditions and non-disorder parent kind of situations nationwide, not specific to this district in any way. With those kind of situations, make sure our teams are comfortable with their response. That being said, that's kind of where we were. We're really doing a great job moving forward, and looking forward to doing a further great job with each of the teams in the training sessions this coming school year.
As a matter of practice, just to give everybody an idea of how Paris works, if there is an incident nationally, all right, the next day, okay, we get a briefing of that incident, and we have an opportunity to join them in a video conference to look at what happened, to analyze it over the course of the next couple of weeks, and any application that would be for us here in district. So they're really good about following up on if there's an incident that could impact us, all right? What does it mean? How is it interpreted? What's the real meaning of what happened? And how does that impact us in terms of our practices here? And I have to thank Brian personally for that, because the next day we get that report. It's amazing. It's great response.
So Brian, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Have there been advancements or big changes to the protocol since we've been using you guys in terms of each time there's been a school shooting or a major incident? Have we updated the plans and changed what we've done? I know you probably can't share specifically what we've done, but if you can, that would be interesting.
Some of the confidential information that's in the building level plans I can't share in a general setting, but there have been certain modifications that we follow what New York State guidelines are. New York State SED will potentially tell us modify certain operations, certain things in our plans, one of which was the cybersecurity acts that they wanted to see in our plans over the last 2 years. It's not required yet, but we're ahead of the game because we've had that in our building level plans. And we've kind of been, if you will, ahead of the curve when it comes to a lot of things in this district, because each of the teams and the district as a whole embrace all of the items that are happening. Ben touched on any of the debriefs. We want to make sure if, God forbid, something, if we were to make some type of comparison, where we would fit in and how we would handle things and how we would react without overreacting, if you will. So yes, we've kept right up on any modifications. There haven't been a lot of changes when it comes to SED. There were a lot more protocol changes when it came to COVID regulations. We made sure you were completely compliant with anything that had to be in the plans themselves.
So are we now back to the protocols before, like I know during COVID, we were supposed to keep the doors locked and not wear masks, and now we are wearing masks, so are we almost back or back to where we were before COVID?
As far as drill
In terms of safety, the safety protocol?
So those are things that we want to remind all the, as we meet each of the teams, we want to remind all the teams, exterior doors should be locked, classroom doors should be in locked positions, and you have that already in place with the infrastructure that you have. And as far as drills are concerned, although New York State has not given us absolute next steps of where we are with the drills, it has been falling to each of the counties, and everybody's been basically recommending going back to those normal drills, if you will, to build on that muscle memory, but at the same time not build on anxiety. So we want that training piece and muscle memory, situational awareness.
Just since you're here, I'll ask a question. In terms of student activity, I've seen different studies that say children, and this is a very specific topic I'm going to find, children should be allowed to wear whatever clothing in terms of hoods, hats, and things like that, or from a security standpoint, it's a negative. I've seen it in various news stories nationally, in various shootings that have gone on, whether it's baggy pants, hats, hoodies, things like that. What's Altaris's recommendation on those things?
We're going to follow whatever New York State recommendations are, district to district. There are certain changes, there are certain things that districts approve, not approve based on their code of conduct. What we
You're the security expert. From a security expert's opinion, what would you recommend?
As far as hats and hoodies,
Yep.
we don't really recommend hoodies being up. Obviously, cold weather, the hoodies should be down. They shouldn't be worn from a recommendation for a safety perspective.
What about hats?
Hats, it varies with hats because there's a difference between, there's so many different hats that are out there. The biggest thing that we always would recommend is to be able to see, we want to be able to recognize folks. There's a challenge about putting the mask on. We want to be able to recognize our staff, our students, and anybody who should or should not be promoted. Therefore, anything that obstructs the face.
So a beanie would be okay, but a visor cap would be verboten.
It would vary depending on, the style. There's so many different styles of hats and things are out there. Give you one purpose answer. It really comes down to you want to be able to have some type of, without using technology, but facial recognition. You want to be able to recognize who people are.
So hoodies up, bad thing. Hats depends on the type of hat and how it's being worn. Would that be consistent with
That's a fair
Altaris's
statement.
general recommendation,
That is-
understanding
that is a
it's
fair
specific to specific?
Correct. Be able to have that facial recognition. So however, whatever you're looking at as far as clothing is concerned, you want to be able to see somebody.
So things that would interfere with facial recognition should be hopefully not allowed or seriously dissuaded.
However, a hoodie, a kid with a hoodie, there's still facial recognition.
Based on the way you wear something, yes. You want to be able to see somebody. That's why it varies. It really is not one size fits all. But
So-
it really comes down to facial
So
recognition.
as long as there is the ability for a teacher or administrator to do facial recognition, we're good.
So our facial recognition can see someone who's got a hood up?
it's very situational awareness. You wanna
How's
be-
the situation? Sorry, you're in the middle of a discussion now. Sorry.
Okay.
Right.
That's fine. If you have a hood up and you're able to see somebody, that's one thing. If you have your hood up, the way that things are worn, if your hood is up and covering your face, you're not gonna be able to potentially recognize somebody. So you gotta be able to see and recognize somebody's face. An administrator or teacher should be able to know who's in their building.
So there's a potential when a hood is up that.
How is more.
When you say, how's it worn where it doesn't cover your face? That's what I'm just trying to understand. It's like when you're saying you just put it up to here as opposed to put it forward?
Yes, it varies the way that you would wear it.
If you pull the strings tight
Yeah.
around the face.
Much
you
different.
don't see much.
Much different.
I have a question, thank you for coming to update us. Can you just let us know, are there any surrounding schools in this area or generally on Long Island that have taken the steps to have armed patrol around the school or armed guards inside the school? And when I say armed, I think we're talking about like long guns.
I know, I think,
Funny term. I
Well,
mean,
because
in
you
Nassau
don't wanna
County,
have,
they
you
want-
don't wanna have
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
weapons,
Jen, in Nassau County, there is one district out of 56
okay?
that has an armed guard
Inside,
who is never on school property.
okay?
He is in a car and he patrols the exterior of the buildings waiting for a phone call.
Is that someone, is that a school district near us?
Massapequa,
Okay. So,
And he's got a long gun.
is that something you recommend?
no,
Medium.
no. It's, no,
It's
he's
like
got,
no deterrent. It's
it's
just
a-
hearing you say long gun.
Jenny has a small gun.
Okay. Oh, we gotta get it.
it's a great question. In New York State, we currently work with over 300 schools, from Erie County all the way through the Hudson Valley, New York City, Long Island. We don't deal with any of the school districts that we deal with, nobody has armed security. Only people that we would recommend professionally is a uniformed school resource officer, as an armed officer in the building. That's the only thing that we would recommend. That's based on national standards, that's based on the National Association of School Resource Officers, and a number of different studies that recommends that the only people, if the district could afford it, and if it's applicable to your local areas, to have a uniformed school police officer, school resource officer.
That would be a Nassau County police
Not-
officer
not-
detailed to the school.
Not armed?
Armed, yes.
Oh, armed,
Those are the
okay.
only armed, yes, about arming, arming security things. The
And
only,
is
the
this
only
something
people that
you
we would
recommend?
recommend being armed in a school would be a uniformed school resource officer supplied to you.
Who's a sworn Nassau County police officer, you're essentially paying to have a detailed officer on your campus.
If a district can afford it, this is your recommendation to have one?
That's the only recommendation, when you're talking about if the district has the appetite to, for any type of armed security, we don't
Not a
recommend
third
armed
party,
security, we
just-
would recommend an armed school resource officer, should that be applicable to the school.
Fine, but are you making a recommendation that we spend the money for that?
I think that's further discussion. We have to reassess where we are as far as safety and security. I don't know. I'd rather have a little bit more discussion with your district as a whole versus where potentially somebody would be placed, especially in public forum, when it
Okay.
comes to where,
I mean, I understand it's a sensitive topic and a sensitive issue, so if there's a discussion to be had, maybe, whether it's with the board or with the administration privately, that's totally fine.
I don't know if Nassau County Police Department even offers that, to tell you the truth.
it's changed over the years.
Okay. And
So what does Massapequa have? They don't have a law resource officer. They have just a.
They have an armed security guard in a car.
I'm sorry.
Again, I think I hope that Pat Ryder will be at one of our upcoming meetings, and again, when we have asked Pat that question, Pat has said that that is not a recommendation that is coming from the Commissioner of Nassau County Police Department. But you'll have an opportunity to ask him, hopefully at our September or October board meeting.
Okay. I guess, and it was a question that I had, I brought up like a while back, I don't know, but how can we take the proactive steps to track, children that may pose a threat to themselves or to others? When it comes to these type of shootings that have happened in the past, we're finding that there was some kind of leading trail leading up to that moment. What could be done to prevent certain?
That probably is a question for, probably not as much for Brian as it is for school staff,
Okay,
in terms of how does the district track
our students. And I think, one of the discussions we've had is if you look at our staff to student ratio, we really have a good handle on our student population. And we have a sense of the physical and mental health of our kids. And again, I think that part of predicting potential issues really is based upon school staff more so than external support. I think we do an incredible job in terms of knowing our 3,150 kids and having a sense of here are the kids that have some academic stresses, here are the kids that have some emotional stresses, here are some kids that need additional supervision and support, and that's something that I think is a strength of our school district.
I mean, I absolutely understand that the school is on top of it and knows its students, but I'm asking from a external security, consultant, and especially with the events that have happened earlier in the year, is there any recommendations, and maybe you don't want to discuss it here, but if there are, you could just say, yes, there are recommendations that I've discussed with administration.
There are recommendations, and that's one of the things we're going to be working with the teams this year as an overview of threat assessment. There are a number of different models that are out there to assist what you already have in place, to look for presumptive indicators and those kind of pieces to assist in looking for student resources more than anything. And that's a collaboration with your mental health professionals within the district.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
We've been discussing for a few board meetings, and Greg did a great presentation on how we.
I'm George Nagel from the Jericho News Journal.
About,
What?
since Greg's here, discussion of how we can valedictorian.
Yeah, so thanks for giving me the opportunity to continue the conversation. I know we just kind of touched the iceberg. The last board meeting I came to, we discussed some of our college admission results of the year, and then led into the weighting of grades and history in Jericho as far as ranking is concerned. So just to kind of reiterate, so we're back on the same page. We eliminated ranking in Jericho about 33 years ago. So there was a time when the majority of high schools on the island, the norm in the country perhaps, was that high schools would rank their students. So if we have 300 students, we'd have a number 1 and we'd have a number 300, a last and a first place. There are actually some districts still on the island that do. There's very few at this point that I'm aware of. But with time came the realization that ranking hurts the majority of students, and that was the decision to eliminate ranking. But with that being said, we still do rank just our top 2 students. So we still have a valedictorian, a salutatorian. For the past 3 years at least, I don't believe we've had a salutatorian, but we've had several valedictorians. And one of the reasons for that is that we use students' unweighted GPAs to rank them. So that means that on a 4-point scale, any student that has a 4.0 after 4 years of high school, actually after 3.5 years of high school, because that's determined prior to their graduation, if they have a 4.0, that means they've never had earned less than an A+ in any class at any point in time for a course that counts towards, that is a high school credit-bearing course. So that's why we potentially have many valedictorians, because we have, most of the time, many students that have all A+ throughout the course of high school. So that brought up a question about how we choose our valedictorian and salutatorian, and for us, that kind of brought it back to the surface of, it's because we use unweighted GPAs, and then when the question came up, why don't we use weighted GPAs, because we do have a weighting system here. The reason was because we give almost all of our courses the same weight. So all Regents level and above courses get a 0.3 additive to the course. So not a percentage of the course, a 0.3 additive. So that means that if a student earned a 3.6 in a course, their weighted GPA in that course was a 3.9. And so that would be, no matter if you had a C or you had an A, that same weighting is applied to all of them. So Regents level and above for us is the majority of the courses that we offer. We have over 25 AP courses at the high school. We have 35 and counting, courses that are associated for college credit. So over the years, that's really increased a lot. We work with CW Post, Adelphi, St. John's, NYIT, Malloy, Adelphi, if I didn't mention that one already. So we have many courses that are now getting that. So an example of that might be forensic science. Forensic science just recently, we just joined with NYIT to offer that as a college level course. So a course that perhaps might not have been weighted before, but that 0.3 additive now gets that weighting. But it does leave many of our, well, not many, but it leaves a good number of our courses without weighting. Those are the majority of which are art and music courses, but even courses like science research, which I think most would agree that science research is one of the most rigorous courses that we offer at the high school, yet that course doesn't count in the weighting. So I believe that's part of why the district has chosen over the years to use the unweighted GPA for the selection of the valedictorian and salutatorian, because there really isn't a distinction in rigor between regents or college or AP. They're all given the same, minus some of those courses that I mentioned. So with that, there's a few solutions depending on what the goal is. If the goal is to have one valedictorian and one salutatorian every year, then we could reweight our courses so that there is a difference in reflecting the level of rigor between courses, or we don't have a valedictorian and salutatorian, which there are a couple of districts on the island that are doing that already and have for years. So I can tell you from the research that I've done in communication with colleges and universities of all levels, from our Ivy Leagues and on down, is that the determination of valedictorian has zero bearing on college admissions. So we can say that with 100% certainty. Colleges have made their decisions on students being admitted prior to students being named valedictorian and salutatorian the majority of the time. So it's sort of like not an afterthought, but it's done after the college process is over for the majority of our students. So we have, on one hand, we all recognize that Jericho and schools like Jericho there's a lot of pressure on kids brought on by themselves. We all probably contributed to it in our own way. But we have recognized over the years that mental health for our students is a top priority. And I think that having a valedictorian, salutatorian still lends to that competition, focus, and state of mind. So today was just another opportunity to kind of continue that conversation, answer any questions that I can on the spot, or just to have a discussion about what your thoughts are. Yes?
When you were talking about Regents level courses, is that most of the electives that the kids take that are sort of half-year courses? Most of those would get no weighting, correct? So
Correct.
So someone who's doing this is discouraged, would be discouraged from taking any type of course like that, as opposed to a core course.
Yes.
Second, I understand your point about public schools on Long Island. Again, very sporadic research shows me that many of the schools that we would ideally, in some ways, like our students to compare themselves to would be some of the high-end private schools, both boarding and day schools. And it seems that most of them, at least the ones I've looked into, don't seem to have a valedictorian or salutatorian either. Has your research included any of those, and can you confirm as I said,
I do not have
data
research
point
to back it
levels
up.
where I haven't really found any that have it.
Right.
But I assume there are some that out there that do, but when you look at those schools, they've sort of gotten rid of those a long time ago.
I would agree with you. I don't have the research to back it up, but from my experience and my conversations with colleagues from other districts, which include private schools, I would say that that's pretty accurate. It is certainly a strong tradition on Long Island. There's 100 or so school districts and only a couple in Nassau County that don't. So I would say that that's a tradition that's held pretty strong, but I think it's to a certain extent outdated. I think that our students that are taking the most rigorous courses or the most rigorous courses that they can be successful in are successful in college admissions, regardless of a sticker on their diploma or a speech at graduation.
And have you gone back like 2, 3, 4, 5 years and run the numbers in whatever theoretical way you've said about doing this, that this would get us down to 1 and 1, or would we still be looking at 4 valedictorians or 50
Yeah, so with the
valedictorians.
revised weighting system that I proposed as a potential alternative, we would have 1 valedictorian and 1 salutatorian with, instead of a 0.3 additive for all of our regents level and above, it would stratify a little bit that AP and college courses and beyond, and we would include beyond courses as advanced computer programming. It's not an AP class, it's not a college class, but it's beyond AP Computer Science A, so that would be an example of a beyond class. And a research class. We also agreed internally that our research classes are some of our most rigorous courses, so they would be included at a 0.4 additive. And then we also were thinking of our arts and our art and music courses that often don't get weighting at all beyond the AP courses that are offering those respective departments. So really having regents level and all of our electives that are not college or AP or research getting the same weighting, so it kind of helps everybody. I recalculated the GPAs for our past graduating class based on that revised weighting, and we did indeed have a number 1 and a number 2, again, if that's the goal. And it had a minimal impact overall on kids. It helped many, and if it didn't help a student, it pretty much statistically kept their grades the same. Maybe it was 0.001 lower, their GPA with the revised weighting system. But for most, it either wound up keeping it the same, or for our students to take the most rigorous courses, it did spread the gap a little bit. And again, at that point, we're going on 4 places, 4 decimal places, whereas with the unweighted GPA, it's if you have a 4.0, you have the highest GPA.
And last question for my colleagues getting here. Would it be true that you would understand, assuming, look, you're talking about really bright kids who are, in most cases, going to get A+ throughout their high school career, would it be true to say that you would know who was on a valedictorian track by freshman year simply because of the course load and the weighting of those courses, and how you would expect those students to go through the subsequent 3.5 or even 4 years from high school? If I would say to you on August 29th, here's the incoming freshman class. This is the schedules that they're taking. These are the kids who, because they're in advanced math or double advanced math or quadruple advanced math, who are going to be taking all of these courses, that here's the group of 100 students or 50 students that have a shot at being valedictorian because of our weighting system. And all the others will still do very, very well, but it's just, that's beyond their reach because of their freshman year curriculum.
Probably not, only because we don't allow any of our 9th graders to take AP classes or college courses, and there are no honors classes in Jericho. So that means that regardless of students' academic ability, they are all at the same level, which would be the base level of regents. We don't
But
have.
would they be able to get to AP classes faster? If they're double accelerated versus single accelerated, they're 1 year closer to taking an AP calculus course. They're 1 year closer to taking an AP science course.
Yes, in
Similarly,
those 2 situations, they may be able to take an AP in math and science earlier than students who are not double accelerated, yes.
and that would most likely be the case. I mean, we say conceivably, that is the case.
Yes, most often it is, yes.
Okay, so it would be that by freshman year, you would be able to look at a group, a subset of students, whether it's 20, 30, 40, 50 students, and say, this is where our valedictorian is most likely coming from, unless we change our grading system and people start getting not all the classes.
I don't know if I would think about it that way. I know what you're saying. I think typically by the end of 10th grade, perhaps, it's a little bit more clear because that's the first grade that students are taking those more advanced classes. I mean, beyond. I mean, the first AP classes can be taken in 10th grade. So if a student is loading up on AP classes in 10th grade and they finish that year with several AP classes with a 4.0, I would say it's likely that those students happen to also be accelerated in math or science and would be more likely to be a valedictorian or salutatorian. But I can tell you that we have many students that fall, I mean, listen, we may have 7 valedictorians, but we have many other students that were just a single A+ away from also being valedictorian.
I understand completely.
Yeah,
We're
right,
talking
so-
about just sort of, I get that part.
Right,
No, I
so we
understand.
could have many more, like I couldn't tell you like these are gonna be the valedictorians. We could have 40 kids that have the very good potential to be valedictorian, but took science research and got an A instead of an A+, and that one time they got an A means they will not be valedictorian.
Right, but
With the
we're
weighting
giving
system
kids
that we
get
have.
all A pluses throughout the school to
Yes.
do that.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, based on all the factors that you've discussed, what is the benefit of having a valedictorian, salutatorian? But even if we change this and it's just to benefit one or two people?
That's the benefit, is
So
for the one or
there-
two. It's
And
an
just
opportunity
Naming rights.
to get
branding rights,
recognition, for two kids.
So, when you weigh that against, mental health and all the other factors that we say, the competition and the parental pressure and the peer pressure and the, just the pressure to take more and more AP classes, to, when you balance it out, I mean,
Listen, the
It
students
sounds like
that
the
earn
recognition-
those A pluses in all these really advanced classes in high school are getting the recognition in their college admission results. The
right, so it
recognition
sounds
is
like
there,
if
so,
we feel strongly that mental health is an important
yes.
thing that we need to deal with for our students to benefit, two kids or even seven kids. It sounds like your recommendation is to
And I
do
can
away
tell you
with
that,
thousands out.
I don't wanna speak for everyone, but I can tell you that I haven't had a conversation yet with an administrator in the district that doesn't agree that the title of valedictorian and salutatorian has no, it has no impact on kids' college admissions, which I would say for parents that are concerned, that's usually the concern that I would hear, that they feel like, but that title will get my student that extra leg up in the college admission process, and I can tell you that that is not the case.
Sam, also, I just got an email, whether a student is double accelerated or single accelerated, all students have the opportunity to take multivariable calculus, which is our highest possible math class, using alternate pathways. Helene Creekstein, just for point of clarification.
No, that's fine, I'm just trying to understand, like I said, I wouldn't, again, without any decision in my head being made, I'm just trying to understand, are we creating something that it's just basically, it's not decided by day one of freshman year, but they sort of like, here, these are the people on the track, but like, that's fine too, if those are the kids who are taking that challenging curriculum, and they may be the ones who deserve to be on that track, and that's where they end up. But I just wanted to understand that part of it, but I understand what Mrs. Creekstein was saying.
So there's two steps here. One is we decide if we want to keep vowels and sals, but I think the other step is you had made a strong case for changing the weighting system regardless of whether we keep that, because I know when you apply to college, there's a weighted average and a weighted GPA and a non-weighted GPA, so would you recommend that we change, regardless of vowels and sals, that we change our weighting system?
Right now, our weighting system does benefit probably a larger percentage of our kids than if we changed it.
So even without science research being weighted?
Right, if we weighted, yes.
When a college or university evaluates a student, do they not use their internal weighting system to review a kid's transcript? So regardless of whether we have a weighting system or we don't have a weighting system, NYU, when they're looking at that transcript, is weighting, AP, US history differently than we might.
That's correct in many cases, but I can tell you, and I know there wasn't agreement necessarily in the room when we talked about it at the last meeting. There are some colleges that will look at a weighted GPA for the purpose of college admission. I'm not talking about the most selective colleges, but I think that there are a percentage of our students that benefit from having
Our weighting system.
and any weighting system.
Okay.
Any weighting system that is giving Regents level courses weight. Because, right, if we want to consider Regents level our base, and we're saying we're giving kids 0.3 additive, whether they get an A plus in a Regents class or they get it in an AP class, that's benefiting many of our kids. So an example of that, there's also very few districts on the island that don't weight. So an example of a district, a neighboring district, Great Neck, did not weight any of their courses. They had a balance out, but they did not have a weighting. but they were on a 100-point scale, which is, it's harder to have 7 valedictorians when you have a GPA out of 100. When you are on a 4-point scale, which I happen to believe is a better GPA system than a 100-point scale, because I think we can agree that the more granular you get, the less statistically viable it is as far as is a 99 better than the 98, and so we've broken that down into only a few times where we can still have that problem, but when you're on a 100-point scale, it's just tougher to do. So that district had some concerned members in the community that were concerned that students at Great Neck were not getting the same benefit as districts that were giving a weighting. They did a survey of districts on the island, and they chose in the end to adopt a weighting system that we used. Whether it's because we're the ones who use it or not, I don't know. But I can tell you, I got a phone call from a parent in Great Neck that came directly to me and wanted clarification on why we give Regents the same weighting as we give AP, which I said, you know what, that's very interesting that you called, because we're having that exact conversation ourselves, and it's something that we're revisiting. But our solution to this is that we're using unweighted GPAs, and that's given us a different, and I don't want to say it's a problem, it's just given us a different situation of why we typically have so many valedictorians.
Sort of as a box question, I understand all 7 or 8, I thought we had 8, maybe only 7. Valedictorians are all smart, all accomplished, all going to great colleges, blah, blah, blah. If I put all the administration, the CAHU, Dr. Kufo, Mr. Grishman, in a room and said, okay, who's our student who we're giving the award for academic achievement in Jericho High School? Would it be a clearer answer?
No, I don't think it would be. I don't think it would be clear.
Okay.
We've got it. I mean, I look at the names of these kids, so I know how close they are when it comes down to it. I can tell you that with the revised ranking, it was a different valedictorian, not one that we have. So
You're telling me that if your new ranking system would be someone who wasn't one of the 8?
that's correct. That's correct, because of an A.
Yeah, it's very.
That's the first thing you said, sorry, but you
Yeah.
said a lot of interesting things, but that's.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're confidential, right? I don't want to share details
You
about
broadcast it,
about
you didn't take it
about
from
kids,
the I don't know
about
what-
kids'
nothing's
names, about
confidential.
kids' names. What I can't, but that's what a revised weighting system does. It means you don't have to get an A+ in everything, because maybe you take a course that's more rigorous, but you say, you know what? I may not be able to get an A+ in this course, but this course is really challenging and I want to take it. So it's kind of meant, I think, to encourage kids to take the course that are best suited to them. So we have some courses, like our science research, for example, that gets no weighting. And it's also known to be one of our more difficult courses. Kids still take it, and many of our kids who take science research are our most successful kids, but not necessarily one of our
Just
values.
blow our minds, would the salutatorian have been one of the 8, or that would have been a total?
No, I don't recall off the top of my head. I just remember thinking that one
That's
thing.
interesting.
Yes.
So what's our next step, that we somehow come up with the resolution that we,
What's the board think?
well, I thought you posed it in the right way, what is our goal? Is our goal to have 1? Is our goal to have none? Is our goal to prioritize students' mental health?
My goal is not to have 8 speeches at graduation. That's my number 1 goal. That's why this issue came up initially. Not to have 8 speeches, not to have 6 speeches,
Well,
not to
you're
have
not the only one that had
If-
a lot of that.
if
That's
you-
it, that's my goal.
Yeah, and I've heard other people with the same goal. If you were to poll our high school students or high school parents, what do you think the outcome would be?
I have no idea.
I would guess that if we polled kids' parents, don't mess with the system, that my kid has a better chance of being a valedictorian.
That makes sense. I understand that.
So I think the popular response would be, don't mess with the system. If we want to argue from, and we've had many discussions in the last 3 years on mental health, there are 3 school districts that have bit the bullet and do not have a valedictorian or salutatorian. So it takes one level of stress, competition, off the table.
I worked in one of those districts, and I can tell you that they were still very successful, and it had been that way for years. So it had just become part of the culture. There was never any questions about why don't we, it was just accepted at that
When
point.
it's long-term part of the culture, there are no blips on the screen. Making the change to potentially no valedictorian, salutatorian, there would, in Jericho, I would predict there would be significant blips on the screen.
There might be, last one, what would, and again, you may not have, do you have a recommendation on what time, if we were to say, follow the superintendent's sort of soft guidance here and say, let's get rid of valedictorian and salutatorian, what would be the time frame? Would you expect to do it for the graduating class of 23, 24, 25?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't,
26, 27.
I wouldn't,
To be after.
I probably wouldn't suggest that, that we pull the rug out from underneath any of our all A+ students that believe they've been on track for this and they are right on course. I feel like that would be,
You
it
say
would
the
be a nice
sophomore,
thing.
junior, and senior class, we leave that as is, so that at best, if we decided tonight, but if we didn't decide, at best, we're looking at the freshman class, if not the 8th graders.
Yeah, agreed. I
I'm
would
asking,
say,
I wasn't proposing that, I was asking.
I would think that, our current 10th graders, our kids going 10th grade this year would be our last, year of having them. That would be, off the top of my head, that's something that I would think.
For any change, and whether that's no valedictorian, salutatorian, or changing a weighting system, the recommendation would be, let's leave incoming 10, 11, and 12 alone.
Okay.
I'm not sure that follows, because if the weighting system is really just for college admissions, if adding the 4-point additive and adding the classes, that could possibly benefit our students.
Yes.
So then there would be no reason to wait on that end of it.
Right, there's several things we could do. We could choose to change the weighting now, but leave our Val and Sal selection based on
That's
unweighted
separate.
GPA. As long as if we keep our Val Sal selected based on unweighted GPA, then it doesn't matter what we do the weighting system. If we want to change the weighting system because we don't think it makes sense, we could do that, but I've heard the flip side argument to changing the weighting system, and that is that as much as we're trying to say this is not a competition and we don't want kids to choose their classes based on that it's AP, our current weighting system does not encourage kids to make those selections based on that because everything gets the same weighting for the most part. So to play devil's advocate, changing the weighting system to a 0.4 for AP and college level courses and making Regents level courses a 0.2 could potentially get students to say, you know what, I was going to take this class, but now with this new weighting system, I benefit from taking this other. So if the goal was to keep one Val and Sal, and that's the goal, then I think this weighting solution kind of fixes that, because we wouldn't look at unweighted at that GPA at that point, and it would maybe make a little bit more sense. But I think that if the decision is that having a Val and Sal does not serve the all but 2 kids in the district, or in our case, maybe 8, then it may make sense to leave the weighting system the way it is and maybe revisit some of the courses that we find questionable. Like maybe science research, just as an example, we could agree right now, well, why don't we? Why haven't we? Well, it's not a Regents level class, but it's clearly beyond, but we haven't been counting that. So we could still revisit the weighting system, but if we're looking at unweighted GPA, they can be separate issues.
But wait, so when we don't rank our students, so the weighting system is only used for a number that we send to colleges where I think I heard that most colleges that most of our students want to apply to don't even pay attention to that rating system because they have their own internal rating. So we're basically making all kinds of changes for the benefit, and again, for the benefit of
We've got
a
kids who
small
benefit.
percentage of the class. I'm
It
not saying
may
that's
be
not a
half of
benefit,
the
but that's
class.
what we're talking about. We're not
Yeah.
You said half.
It may be half the class.
really.
Remember, not all of our kids,
Not
not all of our kids are applying to the most competitive colleges.
No,
We've
actually,
got a high
it seemed like
percentage.
you said there were a few colleges that may use our ranking system. Should they-
Well, there's some SUNYs that have shared that.
Okay, so then, no, so it is a meaningful thing, that's
Yeah,
fine, that's,
it's a
I'm trying to get
meaningful
the magnitude of it.
And it may not make a big difference, but clearly, like one of our neighboring districts that's now chosen to adopt a weighting system, the reason they chose that was because they felt their students didn't have the same benefit that our students in many other districts on the
And
island.
someone's not gonna look at this and say, this is just another example of grade inflation.
All the colleges aren't looking at it that way, but like Ms. Christian said, many colleges are looking, they might see it, the weighted GPA is just meant to reflect rigor, that's what it's meant to do. So whether they use that exact number or they use that as a general sense of the amount of advanced class that our kids take. The tough part in Jericho with our weighting system is Regents is getting the same weighting as AP, so it's not actually a good reflection here.
So the easiest question we have is, you're saying that our current weighting system, setting aside balance out, our current weighting system is doing a disservice to our students, and up to 50% of them, it may impact, that subpar weighting system may actually impact up to 50% of our graduates' college admission process.
No, I would, so I'm gonna rephrase that then, I think you misunderstand. Our current weighting system helps a lot of our kids. Let's just, if we're gonna split our class, if we're talking about ranking out, we're talking about bottom 50% of the class. Our students in the bottom 50% of the class, many of them really benefit from the weighting system that we have, because they're getting the 0.3 additive that's the same as their, their friends that are in the top 50% of the class that are taking the advanced level classes. So our current weighting system does benefit our bottom 50% a lot. Now, our top achieving kids, it doesn't benefit them the same way because they're taking the most rigorous courses and they're getting the same weight. But for them, the colleges that they apply to aren't likely to look at the weighted GPA that we give them anyway. So you see what I mean? The students in our bottom 50% are more likely to apply to a college that will consider the weighted GPA. They're benefiting from the weighting system we have because it's the same for all
But
levels.
you're saying changing the weighting system may actually be detrimental to them now? That's what
I recalculated the GPAs.
50%.
Right, so I recalculate all the GPAs, all the kids in the class, the whole graduating class, just to see what the impact of a changed weighting system would be. And like I said, for most students, it was the students taking the most advanced classes. It definitely jumped them ahead a little bit because they're taking more rigorous courses. Our only Regents level kids, their GPAs went down, but like very insignificant, not significantly. They went down maybe 0.02, maybe
Well, not necessarily meaningful,
Yeah.
it would be, then you're saying it would actually be detrimental to the bottom 50% of our class, potentially, theoretically, sort of whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I don't think it would have a major impact. I think that the revised weighting system just helps reflect rigor. Our current weighting system does not reflect rigor, really at all, other than the fact that we have classes that don't get the weighting at all. Like our art classes, our music classes, some of our half-year electives, science research, they're not getting a weighting. But otherwise, that revised
But that's
weighting
what I
system.
understand, so if you're adding, you're basically, your re-weighting system is just adding points to the system. So how's that helping every student?
Yeah, it's just not distinguishing between rigor, that's all.
So, sounds like the best way to change the weighting system is to keep it as is, but add science research to the list.
Yeah, and potentially other
Okay.
courses, and I think that there's a lot of we've had a lot of internal discussion in our building level cabinets of courses that don't get, and why does this one not get it, and this one, there, some of our arts and our arts classes in general, there's not a lot of incentive, if we're gonna look at weighting, there's not a lot of incentive for them to take it, and we can all agree that we value the arts. So the revised weighting system I proposed, if the goal was to have one valedictorian and one salutatorian, would be to give our arts classes the same weighting as we give our Regents level classes. So that was sort of that sort of balanced it out a little bit. But I mean, there's clearly a lot to be thought about, so I do feel
It
like.
sounds like what we need to decide is what our goal is. Is our goal to have one val-sal, to cut down the speeches, or is it to, I think we all agree that we want to do something.
Don't
Okay.
speak.
Yeah, no, I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think,
Other
or
speeches.
is our priority not to focus on mental health and not have val-sal at all? So, I mean, I don't know if you guys are ready to say
No,
how you feel on that, or
Do
you
you have
want?
a piece of paper that walks through the weighting system, like the old system and your proposed system, is that a confidential? I mean,
Yeah, no,
I can see it, I don't know if that's a public.
Yeah, no,
document,
we
it's
have,
not a confidential document.
it's on our high school transcripts we sent to college, and which I I have it, I can share it with you. It was on the slides I did last time. It just,
Oh, well, I think, did you hand out those slides?
I just put them up on the screen. I don't think I
Greg,
handed
is
it
it
out.
possible that you could send us by
Yes.
email current waiting system
Current waiting system.
and potential
Yeah.
proposed waiting system?
Right, which is,
So that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, so just.
So we can look at them side by side and continue
Yeah,
the
I
discussion
didn't
next.
understand, as Mr. Citron said, that you were lowering the weighting for regions, so that obviously, that's what I didn't understand how it was low.
right, Regents.
Yeah, it was going from point
So that's one way, but then there's another way just to add certain classes to
Right.
the same
So
system.
by doing that, at least we have something to look at and discuss in September. Continue, if the board would like, continue discussions in
I
September.
think it's two conversations. I think the weighting, there's arguments for and arguments against. Then is it the intention to recognize the highest and second highest performing student at graduation?
Right.
Versus groups of students.
What,
And
what's,
there's
what's
also
the
another
goal?
way to pick
What's the goal?
students who get to speak at graduation, there could be other
I mean,
contexts.
historically, again, my high school, we had a valedictorian, we had a salutatorian, I was neither. But it's, again, it was the intent of the school to recognize the highest and second highest achieving student at graduation. And they had an opportunity to address the graduates and those who attended the graduation. If that's our intention, then, perhaps we think about making a change.
Well,
Which is independent of the
yeah,
weighting.
Right, I mean, I'd like to,
The board needs to decide what's the priority.
I'd like to add, just for an example of how it contributes to a competition environment. When we go to announce who our valedictorians are, we have a wave of requests for grade changes from students that one time did not get an A+. So it's not something that just naturally happens and everybody's okay with it. We say, we are announcing our valedictorians, or leading up to it, when kids realize, oh man, like I went into my senior year and I had that one class that I got an A, I got an A in instead of an A+. Suddenly requests for grade changes come in, so it's impacting our kids. Having a valedictorian, salutatorian impacts our kids.
The valedictorian didn't realize that he had to get all straight A pluses, and he didn't know that.
It doesn't click for everybody right
He
away.
doesn't qualify for valedictorian, or
Yeah.
she doesn't qualify for valedictorian, she didn't see that coming.
Until it's actually real, sometimes these things don't become real for kids. And parents, where it's like, wait a second, you mean that if you had all A pluses, like not everybody necessarily thinks about that it's impossible
No, no,
here
sure,
to be a valedictorian if you get a single A. I think many families would feel like you could still potentially be valedictorian, and in some districts, that's,
Well, under your revised system, that actually would be true.
correct.
So our next step is you're gonna send us,
I will send you our current weighting system, the potential proposed revised system, which, again, there's a ton of ways to re-weight courses. This is just one, it was really just opening up the conversation, so I'd be happy to share both of those with you.
And Denise, we'll post both with the board meeting.
and I guess as this isn't gonna happen for a few years anyway, we have time to.
We have time to
continue
discuss.
No, now, if we don't do it tonight, then the freshman class is sort of locked in. But
I wouldn't-
are you able to get us that information, like, outside of this echo chamber of Long Island, like, do most New York State schools have vowels and cells? Do most high schools nationally still have vowels and cells? I didn't know I understand you said everybody on Long Island.
Yeah,
does.
I
I don't,
think
my
we're.
life doesn't begin and end at the border, so.
Right, I would, if I were to guess, I can try to, I mean, obviously, my colleagues on the island are an easy group to
Of
poll.
course.
So as far as outside districts, I would gather that we're a microcosm reflection of what the majority of the country probably does.
And if you could do the high-end private schools too, like I said, I only have a fixed number of data points, but
Yeah.
again, I think that they're relevant comparison.
And I guess your slideshow, if you'll send us or post the slideshow. right?
Yeah, well, it's two of the slides. One has our current weighting system, the other one's the proposed, so we just take those two
But
slides.
I feel like we've decided that there's a third way, which is to keep the grading system, but it just add classes to it.
Yeah, it could be a
That sounds like
revisiting the courses that we do not weight and talk about whether or not it makes sense.
I don't think anyone would agree that it's not absurd to give weighting to science research.
Right, or social science research, we have several examples of courses. And, my concern again is for our arts courses. I feel like, with our current system, there is they're not the same.
Last question I know, Mrs. Varno, what do they do in New York City? Does each New York City high school have a balance out?
I will check. I don't wanna say because I'm not sure. I would think that they do.
We think we do.
Yeah, I mean, I thought.
Like Brooklyn, Zach Sides, and
It's tradition, and it's honestly, it's a long-lasting one, so, and that's the tough part about change in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent report.
Thank you. I just, we had the report from Alteris tonight, and just while we're on that, we have switched this summer the company that we deal with that handles our security cameras and our alert systems and our automatic door locks and our door keys. So I just wanted to share that we've upgraded our camera capabilities by moving to this new company, and they are assuring us by the opening of school that 100% of our cameras will be up and running, and we will have 100% of coverage of our internal space and our external close to the building space. We've been really pleased that the company's name is Digital Provisions. They've been working closely with Mike at Buildings and Grounds and with Victor in upgrading our system to a point that we're very pleased with the amount of security support that we receive from Digital Provisions.
Just except bathrooms and locker rooms.
Where we can legally have cameras, we cannot legally have a camera in locker rooms, bathrooms.
Is there any other place? Or all offices?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we do not have cameras in classrooms either, except in secure classrooms where, for example, a computer lab, we have cameras in our computer labs.
So it's basically just hallways.
Hallways, correct.
Lunch, cafeterias?
Cafeterias.
And
Gym?
we can't have cameras in there, or
In
we
where?
can't in the classrooms?
I don't know whether that's, Steve, whether that's law or.
It would probably be a collective bargaining issue, because teachers are gonna say that they're being monitored.
No, and the only reason I ask is because of my understanding, and I know Brian has left, one of the issues they had in Texas was, that, or wherever, Texas, was that they didn't understand what was going on in the classrooms. Whether, I'm not even talking about cameras that are on all the time, cameras that have a police key that lets them turn them on so they can actually see into a classroom at some point. I'm not talking about, I understand the monitoring part, I'm not trying to get anybody upset, but I'm saying, if there was a situation where, as much as I like to, that if they wanted to turn it on, they'd say, okay, yes, we do have a camera in there, it can only be turned on in extreme circumstances.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything legally preventing your district from doing that. It's just, even in the situation that you say, there's still a potential that it could be turned on at any point.
Of course.
And I understand, I'm just saying generally speaking, there's nothing legally standing in the way of doing it.
How many classrooms do we have, District 5?
From
That's a
number
big
of
order.
classrooms, anybody have a guesstimate?
322.
Just a guess. Yeah, guess.
Is that the over under? I'm going to be over.
Over.
Yeah.
Sean?
I literally picked a number out of the air, there was zero thought going into that number.
I don't think gambling's.
100, so we're probably 200.
Not more.
Probably 200. Ballpark.
So our communications director's off.
I'm just wrong. I'm going with the under. I should have consulted with Sean
But
first.
that's a lot of unmonitored space, for sure. It's an interesting question.
That's my fourth recommendation on that, Ben, thank you. So, okay, so anyhow, at least sharing with you the work of the Digital Provisions and the work that we've done with them. Moving that into a COVID update. As we're all aware, CDC has revised guidelines. We received something from the Commissioner's office today in typical SED format, telling us that before school opens, we will receive revised recommendations from the New York State Education Department and the New York State Department of Health.
They know we open early,
I was
right?
gonna say, we did too.
Yeah, so we're expecting the Friday night after we open that we'll get something from them. From the people that we're talking to in Albany, we assume that they will be parallel to the CDC recommendations, which means that we are opening in pre-pandemic fashion. And as we've discussed with the board, we are planning to open business as usual when we open in 2 weeks.
Two questions on that.
Sure.
One, we're no longer, pursuant with that, we're no longer doing any contact tracing, which I think we were still doing at the end of last year.
We continue to do contact tracing through the close of business. At this point, we're waiting for guidance, but our plan is not to.
And second of all, unlike before COVID, should children or students still decide, or teachers decide that they still do want to wear a mask, we will now allow them to do that if they so choose.
We will permit any adult or student who would like to wear a mask to wear a mask.
And also, while you say it's business as usual, the recommendation still remains that if someone has COVID, they need
5
to be out
days.
for 5 days, and then mask for 5 days
Correct.
following that.
That is still within the CDC guidelines, and we expect that will be upheld by the New York State Department of Health.
But it has changed that if a sibling was exposed, even
Yeah,
if they're
correct.
unvaccinated, they can come back to
Right.
school.
Correct. Any other COVID stuff?
And so all tests, there's not gonna be more remote tests, like I know there are some people who probably get upset, like, and Mrs. Christine, I know you're listening, the AMC test will now be done in person as opposed to
Correct.
over the internet, and everything's
Correct.
perfect.
I still think people need to take a common sense approach to this. If a child's sick, they should stay home. If there's a question, they should test. And obviously, if they test positive, you can take a confirmatory PCR, see a physician. Again, because COVID's still out there, the last thing we want to do is have a wave, work its way through one of the schools or multiple schools.
And we are being supported from the New York State Department of Health. We will be distributing home tests. I believe on the first day of school, effective the last, I understood we were picking up tests, Brian.
We'll have tests going out, send home the kids on the
First day of school, so we will continue sending home tests.
Oh, no, she says we tested myself.
No, I said those tests don't work. I mean, the rapid tests
Yeah.
are much less, they're not as strong as
Yeah.
going to like an urgent care and doing like a PCR
PCR,
swab.
correct,
That's what I thought,
correct.
yeah.
If done properly, though, I mean, a quality test is going to typically
Depends
be.
at what point you're testing, how many days
Absolutely,
in, there's
yeah.
so many
But
factors.
they're widely available. I mean, even, insurers now are covering them. You go to CVS to pick up a prescription and they ask you, you want a COVID test, we can bill it to your insurance, so. it's really not-
So again, this summer, we probably had more construction going on than we have in our past several summers. The amount of work was literally every place and pretty significant construction. At this point, with the exception of the track, we think all of the projects will be completed by the first day of school. Again, there are many projects in the middle school, high school complex. New roof at Seaman, which we had some concerns with, but we think that is going to be buttoned up. We had some concerns about our 3 technology classrooms in the middle school, and right now those also appear to be in pretty good shape for the opening of school. I can't say enough about our custodial crew for the work that they've done this summer, working around construction, moving offices, repacking offices, cleaning classrooms. Again, there are not enough words of support for our entire buildings and grounds staff and the leadership of Mike Kahn and Brian working with Mike in terms of the work that they've done this summer. So kudos, and we'll recognize our guys at the opening day of school
Thank
for
you,
the
Brian.
incredible work.
Clarify the one thing we talked about, that the track may impact some practices for football and soccer for the first week of school.
Possibly, yes.
Possibly.
However, that will not preclude there being football practices and soccer practices in alternate locations.
I want you to say it as opposed to people yelling.
And according to Sam's recommendations, we will use alternate spaces for those practices for the first week of school, maybe the first 10 days of school. Thank you, Sam.
I did not.
Sam's backyard.
Sam's backyard if we need it. Good grass. Again, opening of school, we're full speed ahead in terms of moving toward a smooth opening of school. We start this week with our new teacher orientation, and all is scheduled, and our transportation is up and running, our student schedules are looking good. We look fully staffed at this point and look forward to a very smooth opening of school. I think Denise sent out an email in the last few days that our new website is up and running. Again, I got some very positive feedback in terms of layout and design, that people really like that. And again, ask you to please go on and take a look at our new website. Again, it took us, probably it's 6 months or a year in the works, and we thank Patrick and Denise for spending hours and hours and hours to get the transition from our old website to the new website. Our summer program this summer was extremely successful again. I'm going to ask Chad and Dave to speak very briefly at our September meeting, just to overview what the summer program looked like. Our UPK program is up and ready to go. I know Joanna has been working real closely with Ivy in the planning and our discussions with Scope in terms of ensuring that we're staffed. And the program right now looks like we're eager to see that take off, and we're pleased with where we are at this point in time. Also, we've had some discussions. A staff member asked us to please review Board Policy 6110 and asked the board to take a look at that policy to see if it's possible that the board might make some revisions. The board and administration have reviewed that board policy and have decided to leave that board policy in place as is. And the last thing I have on my list is a congratulations to Sean Reed. Sean is with us this evening. Sean will be appointed this evening to a new position as the assistant head of the middle school, high school complex. Sean has been doing an excellent job over the last several months in again, keeping a huge amount of square footage in Jericho fashion. And we thank him for the incredible job he's done, and an opportunity to promote him this evening in our board packet. So congratulations. And I think I got it.
What's the status of the anatomy table that we?
If you look at the front of our building, there is a wood pine box, a very large wood pine box that is empty. That is what the anatomy table came packaged in. It is set up in the classroom. There's been training that's taken place. Actually, Ivy even joined in on some of the training. It's an incredible apparatus. Maybe at some point we'll start a board meeting around that table. Again, it will be up and ready to go for the first day of school. And we are really pleased with that.
Well, hold on, no, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was just gonna ask, Victor, are we good with, beginning of school, or with staffing in the cafeteria? Anything that has changed?
Yeah, we were able to hire, I believe, 5 or 6 cafeteria workers. Unfortunately, 3 from last year resigned, so we're not that far ahead, but we are a bit ahead. But we're still continuing. We did get a lot of, we put it on Olaf's, what was that?
The local papers, I think she did.
Local papers, indeed. So we did a lot of different things. We did.
Full-time that we hired, or part-timers?
We had a couple that were either 5 or 6 hours, and the balance were 3 hours. So we got a little variety of each.
Okay. And the new vending machines that were supposed to go in, are they in?
They're not in yet. They're due to be delivered next week.
We need a taste test then.
But so this will be up and running for the first week of school.
The vending machines? Yeah.
What do we do? We get paid for their space and they collect all the money, or they give all the money back to us?
They don't give all the money back.
I mean, they obviously take some money.
We get a percentage.
We get a percentage, so no flat rate, we just get a percentage.
We get a percentage of the sales.
And how often do they get restocked? You know?
Well, they'll come a couple times a
that's all health, I'm sorry, that's all healthy options, right?
Not 100%.
Oh, not, oh.
They were all snacks that are approved by the USDA for schools,
Okay.
without doubt, which
Okay.
we had before.
But
But we are adding fresh fruit.
Okay.
I'm
Can you
not
please
gonna
give us
say
sales
that,
numbers on the fresh fruit?
I'm sorry.
I want to see sales numbers on the fresh fruit.
Next to,
I'm
It'll go
not-
from fresh fruit to rotten fruit to
There's-
dehydrated fruit.
Jennifer, there's definitely still gonna be the allowable Doritos and those types of
So
things.
Doritos
So-
is
I
a
wouldn't
rotten
have
fruit.
any other.
there's a low fat
option.
Doritos. in there.
Doritos are alive and well.
ketchup and mustard
How many machines, we got a lot
Flaming
more
hot
machines?
Cheetos.
We're not doing more, we're just replacing the ones we had. But they'll all be, Apple Pay, cards, what have you, so it'll be easier, for students.
What's this, how's the academy going and how many students do we have in it this year?
Right now, we will update the board once school is open. So actually, we'll have Dave report to us, Dave and Greg, report to us at the September meeting what enrollment looks like.
What's the status of the DEI committee? I was hoping that we would have a
We will,
meeting soon of
yeah,
it and the composition.
we will be able to report to the board by the September board meeting, the makeup of the DEI committee.
So we started advertising for it?
We have not advertised for it, we.
We didn't advertise all kinds of places as needed.
In your backyard.
Backyard, you won't find a lot of takers, but yeah.
I think we are gonna hand select, a representative from different organizations. So it is representative of people with vested interest in the school district.
And what about the goals? I know
The
you
goals-
sent the goals out, what's the
Yeah,
next step?
The next step is we were gonna present those goals to the board at the September board meeting for their discussion and directive for next steps.
And are the email that we got about the goals were just the goals without the,
Correct.
objective, what was it, I don't remember what they were called, so what's the, are we just gonna see the goals or
We-
the whole package?
No,
They were
they're-
like tied together.
Yeah, all we're submitting, all we have at this point are the overarching goals. And then we're gonna ask the board to review the overarching goals and then either develop or ask us to develop the activities to support those goals.
Okay, but we, in the goals workshop, like those people spent time on the activities underneath.
Yes, they did,
Okay.
and we appreciated it.
I had a question regarding, homecoming, anything new that we should know that's upcoming?
Homecoming is planned up and running. There are, I think last conversation with John, there were, I don't know, about half a dozen home events for our homecoming. And I know that there was some expanded, Denise, some expanded activities.
We're looking to provide some more safe options, not roller coasters. So I just spoke with the vendor, I think we're gonna be able to add a fun house, like a house of mirrors and a slide this year in addition to the games that we had. That was a big success, last year. And then we'll have our club set up again, our high school clubs, we'll have all different activities. So, that will be for Friday after school, where the middle school students will be able to come out again like they did last year. And then there'll be an activity for high school students Friday night, and then we'll have Saturday for everybody. We'll have all the games going on, we'll have all the activities set up. And I think the one that John was having trouble planning was varsity soccer, but I think he was able to.
I believe last conversation was he did get varsity soccer
Yeah.
and football as well.
I think JV.
I have a question about
Yeah.
that.
I think it's JV football, I think it's gonna be the Friday evening, like an afternoon
Okay.
game, is what I think.
But are we gonna do something for the varsity team that's playing here for the first time ever on the field on Friday night lights? On September 9th? I think the school should do something for that.
I think you should plan it.
No, I don't get this field here.
Martin, what do you have in mind in terms of?
I think the school should promote the first Friday night ever under the lights football game at Jericho High School with our Jericho varsity football team. I mean, the whole point of partnering with Plainview and us spending 5 years trying to get a football team back together was to then have a football team back at Jericho. And so, I'm sorry, but I'm very passionate about it, you know that.
We know that.
And I think it should be promoted as a big thing here for Friday night.
I'm sure we were planning on promoting it. We will follow up to see what that looks like.
Putting it on my calendar right now.
September 9th?
Yes, it's Friday night, 6:30 game under the new lights on a new turf field. It's a great way to
Were they playing?
christen, I want to say Hempstead, but I'm not 100% sure. You can go back and look at the
I
schedule.
can see it right. So,
We have 2 home games on the Jericho field for the first time ever this year in 5 years.
yeah, that's-
Oh, the track has something.
The track will be done.
Otherwise, there'll be a bridge. Just so everyone knows, we're keeping our numbers, class cutoffs for elementary schools at 23 students.
That the board has set that number on a go-forward basis, so we are currently still operating under 23 is the max, K-5.
And when you were talking about the anatomy table, that's the thing we got the $100,000 check from Microsoft.
We have that, yeah.
What is it?
We got, how much did we get from 70?
What is anatomy?
That's how-
Is that a fancy
It's an
way of saying
anatomy
anatomy?
table.
Okay.
In a different language.
We get 75 from the county out of, I think it was 104,000.
But that was the check we had at the last meeting from last.
So
So I didn't get the real check.
we got
We got the
75.
big check that you have in the back of your car, like Happy Gilmore driving around, the big checks, but Lafayette is eventually gonna get us.
No, we had to buy it first, and now I have to go through the, I don't know, what's the whole process.
Tell him no
Is
one
it really a
voted for
month?
him.
Okay, so he has to get us the month, so Josh Lafayette is gonna deliver the month.
Yeah, well,
Sam, we have been arm wrestling, again, not Josh's fault, but we've all been arm wrestling with the county.
They said, Josh, no one's voting for him unless he
Yeah.
votes.
Stop joking about that.
We have,
Everybody go out and vote for whoever you wanna vote for over the next 10 days, but just go vote
That's
for
only
somebody.
that's only the primary, but the Republican already, they have a nominee.
Okay, well, for a Democrat, vote over the next 10 days.
But the
and then
actual
after that,
election
so-
is November,
And then vote in November.
just primary.
yes.
I didn't know there was. I
Calm
knew-
down.
I knew George was running, I just didn't know if he had.
No, I'm just saying the actual
Everybody had an
election.
opponent. Did not know. Okay.
the good of the order.
Oh, and the last thing was dress code, since we talked about it a little bit before. Is that new dress code finalized?
Yes.
Is it posted on our website?
It's posted within the high school student handbook, which is up there.
And what does it say about facial recognition hoodies? They're allowed, right?
They're the same, it is not different than any part of the discussion we've had over the last year.
Okay, no, I know it changed a lot. I know
It was-
I know you presented the other day to the student committee, who, they liked it a lot more than the old one, they told me.
Okay, that's good to hear. The changes that were made were at a teacher's discretion. A teacher who was uncomfortable with a hoodie or a baseball hat may ask the student to please remove them in the classroom.
But they're allowed to wear the hoodies in the hallway there?
Correct.
And even though our security people seem to say that wasn't a great idea.
I probably heard something similar to what you heard, but I think as long as we can see a student's face, we're comfortable with that.
Is that the last that you sent on July 6th?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a teacher's discretion whether or not a hat or hood may be worn in their class unless for religious purposes.
Okay, again, I mean, I assume you spoke to the teachers, using that they're comfortable putting that onus on a teacher to then, aggravate a student, aggravate a parent, or just create unnecessary, things, but we've gone over this before, I won't belabor the point, it's a problem, it should be fixed, it will be fixed.
Well, again, we've said it, if the board wants to take on dress code,
Just hoodies. Good night, team.
Thanks again, congratulations.
And then the last thing was, in terms of the website, some of the material that's dated, are we working on updating all that
If you see
stuff?
something, please let me know, we definitely are, Patrick and I are constantly.
Oh, you want, okay, I didn't want to send you a
No,
list
send
of.
the list, yeah, because it's hard to find everything that's on there, I think
I'll
we've done a
send you,
good
I'll
job.
try to get as much as I can by tomorrow, there's a fair amount, but.
Sure, there's no rush to do that tomorrow, but yeah, we're updating, as soon as we find something, we've been looking, we asked administrators to look, anytime we're asking any parents and see something, let us know, we'll definitely make a change we want to.
Put it in the board notes, we'll put that in the board notes, so say if you see something that needs to be updated in the website, please let us
Let us
know.
know. Perfect.
Anything else?
Oh, and what are the elementary schools and middle schools doing about a dress code? I know you said the dress code that was created was simply for the high school, are the other schools addressing that fact, or they're just going with
I
the
think they're
old
going,
format?
I think they're going past practice, with whatever's been in place in the elementary schools and middle schools.
And what they had in place was the same as what used to be in place in the high school?
No, I think each one, I think the elementary schools had,
more or less appropriate dress code. Yeah, there's no formal dress code at the elementary.
There's no written dress code at the elementary level. And you think that's true for the other two elementary schools?
Probably.
Okay.
Part of the code.
There must be something, because I know that I've been told
We
footwear,
probably-
it was
probably
a,
didn't
it's like a tank top, you can't wear for gym.
Hello,
When was the spaghetti strap thing? Was that middle school?
that was middle school. That was elementary. Ivy's the expert on that.
Yeah, she said she didn't allow
I
wear
did
hats.
not allow
Kids wear hats in elementary school.
in the building at all.
In the building at all. By the way, and just, that's, again, not a safety issue, I was made aware of last night, 2 nights ago, that there's a new hoodie that has built-in vape capability. So,
That's not even new.
It's the.
Yeah.
It was in all those videos that we saw.
It's been for a
you
while.
must watch different videos than.
No, they showed it at one of the school,
We
like
had a
the
speaker come
assembly
in
or
a number of
something.
years ago that showed us, they had the
Oh,
hoodies
really?
with the vape. that
There's
was
also a
in the
DIY
street.
video on how to make your regular hoodie into a vape. Another reason not to have hoodies, but
How
hey,
big is the hoodie issue?
to me, it's a very big issue.
Sam thinks it's.
I think it's
No, I
a-
see you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
Do we have a lot of kids that are wearing hoodies throughout the day trying
No,
to
because
conceal
they
their
haven't really
faces?
been allowed to, but now they're allowed to.
Kids have been wearing hoodies, Sam, in the high school.
Now they're not walking around on, not explicitly condone the way it is going on with the bill now.
I don't expect to see anything different the coming year than I saw in the past year.
Okay, so we disagree on that, we'll see, like I said, these are all empirically verifiable things.
He said,
Sam, I think you have a good point. I can't think of a particular good reason why as a kid needs to walk around with his head covered and concealed.
Well, there is actually from the mental health standpoint, because there are some kids that need either the sensory or they
Well,
don't.
I think that's a different conversation. If there's a
There's an
legitimate
exception,
reason,
yes.
yeah.
We've heard from some of our PPS staff saying that they supported for some of their kids to be able to wear hoodies.
No, listen, if there's a particular need, I'm all for it, but I mean, it's,
And that was probably the basis of our recommendation.
Let's just quickly approve the minutes from the last meeting, and then we'll move to opportunities and elections to be heard. Recommend a motion be resolved that the Board of Education make any necessary corrections, move the approval of the minutes of the reorganization meeting on July 11th and the regular meeting on July 11th.
I'll make a motion.
So moved. Second. Sam and Chris, any discussion? All in favor? Opportunity for the public to be heard. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please tell us your name and affiliation. If you're representing a specific group, if you'd like your statement to be included in our minutes, you must hand a written copy to Victor before speaking. As always, public discussion on matters relating to staff and students at which their reputation, privacy, or right to due process or those of others could in some way be violated is prohibited. Anyone? Did you get any emails? I'm just checking. Okay. New business. We have 2 SIPs, 2023-01 and 2023-02. Resolved that the Board of Education approves those 2 stipulations for the one's for 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24 school year, and one's for just the 22-23 school year, and directs the superintendent to sign such stipulations on behalf of the board. Motion, Jen, second, Sam, any discussion? I have one question, is the second stip is much higher than any I remember seeing.
A more involved situation. Significantly involved.
I had a question for, in the documents themselves, just looking at the first step, it's lacking something that was in the second step, and I know that they were drafted separately, but they're both good points, and I'm just wondering why they weren't present in both. In contract 2,
Who answers the, like, do you know?
I don't.
Steve,
No, that's gonna be a Steve question.
Yeah, no, because I know the dollar goes.
Yeah,
No,
again,
it's not with
the
with
STIPs,
regard to wording.
Okay.
the special ed STIPs were primarily developed by Chris Benthorn. But
I just
again,
want to make sure the person you were asking was here, because I don't know if it was a Kim thing or.
there might be a question that we have to take Steve back to Chris Benthorn to answer, but go to it.
In contract 2, it mentions that the district shall have no further obligation after, and it includes, it's blacked out, but the date of the expected graduation of the student, irrespective of whether the student graduates from the high school, and again, by the date. That's in contract in the second step, but not present in the first, and I think that that's a valid thing to have in both, that we're not responsible after the student graduates.
So I can't, I would have to take that back to Chris Ventura, because he's the one that negotiates agreements, but, the fact of the matter is, you can make the argument that the second kid may not actually finish school at that point. Special education students can go to 21, 23 due to COVID rules. So it leaves the argument that that person may not graduate at the end of the 22-23 school year, whereas in the first agreement, this person probably is aged out completely and therefore cannot continue schooling. But again, that's just a simple reading of the agreements, and that's the background. But without actually going back and figuring, without speaking to Chris as to the actual facts, I can't give you an affirmative answer.
But this other one, in the first step, it says, the district's payment obligation is outlined here, are contingent on the fact that, it's contingent on the fact that the student remains in the district. And I think that should be present in both, like we shouldn't be financially
Oh, of
obligated.
course.
But that's not present in both of them.
Well, the second one's only for the next school year, so it leaves a lot to be decided that a person's gonna move out in the middle of the school year, and regardless of the fact, in the event that they know that they move out of district, the district would have the ability, which they have in the past, to say, you are not a resident, you are no longer enrolled in the school, and therefore there's no obligation anyway.
You don't have to pick that.
No, the reason between the two contracts, and again, I would confirm with Chris just to understand, is that in the first one, it's multi-year deal. This goes into the 23-24 school year, whereas the second one is only for the upcoming school year. So it's highly unlikely that someone's going to leave in the middle of the school year. But granted, in the Winnebago manual, it never said that cruise control doesn't drive the car for you. Now it does, because someone actually did it.
Need more reason.
I know, but it's.
Little.
McDonald's didn't have hot coffee on it.
I was gonna say hot coffee.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Recommended, motion be resolved that the President of the Board of Education authorized to execute an employment agreement for the 22-23 school year.
Yeah, all agreements, we set the salaries on an annual basis,
Oh, okay.
but in that agreement, it states a 4-year probationary employment.
That makes sense, okay. For Melissa Lee,
Say who she is?
so she,
But Melissa Lee is will be appointed as the treasurer, and in effect, the assistant to the assistant superintendent for business. Very pleased with her candidacy. Expect that she is going to be a significant supporter and addition to the business office staff.
she's replacing Denise Gillis, who
Is currently an assistant superintendent, was appointed assistant superintendent for business, West Babylon.
do I have a motion?
Victor is the assistant superintendent for finance creative.
Creative finance.
I'll make the motion.
Jen, second. Divya, any discussion? All in favor? Should we kind of use these two together?
Professional development
Oh,
plan
sorry.
is,
Oh,
and that's
skip
on.
that one.
Yeah.
Adoption of professional development plan, be it resolved that the Board of Education adopts the professional development plan for the 22-23 school year as shown in the attached. Motion. Chris, second. Divya, do you want to just explain what it is?
It's just how we spend our professional development funds, how professional development is delivered, the variety of things that we do here, and who some of those providers are.
Were there any significant changes from last year?
Not really in the overall plan. I mean, we've added some different foci, actually, such as the Danielson rubric. So we've added some consultants who've been working with the administrators and then with the teachers.
All in favor? I was gonna ask we have 2 trips coming out, the trip to Disney with the, is it chorus or just all the music?
It's chorus,
And
band, and orchestra.
in April.
And then
High school. High school and E3 Washington.
Oh, okay. No, so
Disney is
trip
9 to 12.
9 to 12.
Washington is 8th grade.
And the Washington trip is
April.
something we've done every year except
Correct.
during COVID, so that's back. But- So we're being asked to sign riders to the contract with the tour companies.
So what we
that's
do
to-
is we take the standard contract that Custom Tour sends to us and Gerber sends to us. We actually, Steve is the one who handles clarification, and he puts together riders to provide us with additional protections. So the riders were actually drafted by Ingham and Smith to provide us with additional protections in both the Disney contract and the Washington DC contract.
What kind of protections?
Here he
If
is.
you read through the riders, the liability.
Okay.
Protections in the Gerber and Disney contracts.
Correct.
Oh, did
That's
we
right.
do a motion yet, or?
No.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Steve, we're talking
Jen,
about
second.
your riders that you put together
Maybe
for
we
us.
have that? Jen, second, for motion, do we a second?
On both.
On both, yeah, we're doing them too. I have a question on the custom tours.
Mhm.
It says that we're indemnifying them for conduct or action of our employees or students, and it doesn't say negligent, gross negligent, it's just any, it's like a broad
Yes.
indemnification without any
So,
bad conduct.
well, the bad conduct, it's really, I mean, it's for kids who trash hotel rooms, kids who do
But why
things.
wouldn't you use the word like malicious or negligent, like
Well,
wrongful?
of course, but if a kid, it doesn't have to be, and that's the problem. So the kid damages something, and again, I blame, I'm saying kids just because it's the easiest one. You know, Custom Tours isn't gonna pick it up if a kid accidentally breaks a vase, or a kid accidentally breaks something, they're not going to, that's how Custom Tours goes out of business. So, I mean, this is something that she was actually strong on, this is the only, I mean, if you wanted a trip for Custom Tours was going to Disney, if you want them to go to Disney, that paragraph had to be in there. That's the reason why it's the way it is. Otherwise, they would not have. I mean, obviously, the important thing is, you know, the school district needs to be protected in the event that something goes awry on the trip. So we felt, that again, it's up to the court, but we ultimately felt that if we need to indemnify for damage caused by our own staff and staff and students, that's that's the risk to take in order to have the trip to Disney for whatever purpose you guys are doing it for.
So what could our, like, I mean, I know it's
Yeah,
so hard to
I
imagine,
mean,
but what's our
obviously-
maximum liability on something?
Obviously, it's only in the event that Custom Tours gets sued for something. So again, this is one of those things in which, what's the liability? I can't tell you that because again, it's damage caused by someone. If a kid goes and, we'll say staff member goes and punches someone in the face while on the trip and they sue Custom Tours, well, there's a lot more at play. I can't quantify. I don't think it's something that's gonna come up in the scheme of this trip, especially with regards to, what's happening and what's actually going on here. The identification clause that's important to you guys is the fact that if anything goes wrong with regards to anything happening on the trip, that Custom Tour will identify. But they wanted to have some sort of reverse back.
And do our children or the parents of the children also sign something when they go on the trip that they're responsible if their kid does something like breaks?
Yeah, can we
The
add that?
TV
So
or whatever?
Those documents that the parents have to sign, I know they have to sign a waiver.
That's internal. I mean, obviously, that's something that we can create. I'm sure that I mean, while these students are on these trips, they're still students, which means they still have to abide by the code of conduct.
It's an
But
accident.
accidents happen.
If
But
they trash your hotel room, it's malicious.
It was
and
an
you're-
that's
accident.
there, that's
But
there.
I'm saying, yeah, I'm saying if they break a friggin' light bulb,
Yeah, but
it's $5 and that's what it is.
So I saw in the documents that there is a waiver that the
Mhm.
parents have to sign, so maybe if you could add if
Yeah,
my
all right,
kid
we
does
signed it
something
already,
wrong.
it's all done.
Oh,
Waivers are signed.
That's it.
for both trips?
Both trips, waivers signed, money in. Washington DC has a little bit of another day or two, she might be able to change it for that 15% of the class that hasn't signed it.
Next, hopefully nothing happens, but next
Yeah, I
year.
mean, that's
Put it in for next
For
year.
that one in particular, the waiver, that's an internal document that I think came from the school district, did not come from me. If you want us to take a look at it, we will gladly make
Well, apparently
improvements.
it's too late, so.
Well, for next
For next year.
we can gladly make changes if needed.
Thank you.
Steve, I have a question.
Of course.
There's nothing in either of the contracts about, like health-related issues or
emergencies, like,
Or this is only a rider, so you didn't see the whole, we didn't see the whole contract.
So this is a rider, so basically what happens is I take a look at their contracts and I say, well, here are all the things that are missing, and this is something that we need to do to protect the district. I mean, when it comes to health, there's a force majeure clause in there, so if there are emergencies specifically related to COVID, the trip gets canceled, you know, everything that's refundable will come back. Obviously, if there's non-refundable costs, they're not refundable, it's
Buy the insurance, they make you buy the insurance, parents just buy the insurance and it's stepped up insurance, it's like $45.
If, but both of them are clear, if the second one said there is no refund.
If there's no refund, yeah.
Because I think it's because they already bought the.
The trip's paid for. I
No,
mean,
for the Gerber one.
Yeah, the Gerber one's the one, I think the trip is in a couple of weeks. November, sorry.
If someone develops COVID on the trip, who has to pay for getting the separate room for that person? Who bears that cost?
Well, considering the rooms are no longer part of Gerber, that would probably be the school district / parent. Again, this is something, the difference here is that the school district's not technically, this is a parent expense trip that the school district has a contract with, because the school district there's certain obligations that the school district needs to have in order for the kids to go on the trip. But ultimately, payment is, even though the school district may be paying the vendor, payment's coming from the parents to the school district. So ultimately, if there's COVID, obviously I would say probably somehow find a way to get the child home first and foremost, as opposed to a separate room. But I would, again, we don't know, this is the first round of trips that's going.
The Gerber trip is one night. It's like 5:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, and you come back at 8:30 on Thursday. So
Okay.
yes, there's definitely a chance that someone's
Okay.
gonna get diagnosed with
Okay.
COVID, not that bad. I think
The
Washington,
Disney trip.
Disney is 2 days, 2
Yeah,
nights.
the whole weekend.
It's like
Disney's, I think
Friday.
Disney's 3 nights.
Oh, it's 3
You
nights,
know,
sorry.
that's already,
Yeah, but that's Florida, they don't even test it, it's illegal. Getting COVID is illegal in Florida. There's a lot of things illegal in Florida, getting COVID, one of them.
It doesn't exist in Florida.
don't be jealous, you know you're in Florida.
I know in the past, we've had certain things, and you can rearrange rooms and, double up and isolate in another room,
Okay.
Yeah.
We've done that before on overnights. Where somebody got sick,
I mean,
pre-COVID.
also in a place like Disney, the likelihood of finding an open hotel room in that hotel at the time that you're actually there is slim to none. I mean, finding a hotel in Disney 4 months prior to going is slim to none either, so.
Oh, yeah, I saw some, one of them, I forgot which one, maybe it was Washington, it was like, includes tickets to this if they're available. They're in 2 different places, like, wouldn't they get that, like, can't they get them before, that's what kind of big hit for that huge
Yeah.
group of people. It said if, tickets to 2 things, it was like 2 different museums, and it says if available.
Well, the possibility is some of the museums aren't open every day during the week, so.
But wouldn't the trip know, like, the trip should know?
I would hope so. I would truly hope so.
Maybe
But I
they're saying
think-
they change it, they may change, maybe they'll shut down, maybe
Yeah.
they'll do,
Yeah.
stuff happens. Maybe some private rooms in soon go to tours, and so they're not able to get everything.
Okay. All in favor? Authorization to amend employment contracts. Whereas certain unaligned management confidential employees identified herein have entered into employment agreements with the school, and such agreements identify the terms and conditions of employment, including but not limited to health insurance contributions during active employment and in retirement. The board is seeking to amend the retirement health benefit insurance contribution for, there's people listed here, and then during our executive session, we added 3 more to the list. So Laura Savino, Denise Nash, Michael Rubino, Michael Hahn, Kim Conger, Pat Fogarty, Tracy Gillette, Rita Dolce, Emery Cordero, and Michelle Stoffel. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the district to amend the employment agreements of the above individuals to reflect the employer health insurance contribution rate upon retirement from the district to be 85% and retiree contribution of 15%. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education directs the school district administration to take necessary action to implement this change in district retirement premium contributions. Do I have a motion? Jen, second. Divya, any discussion?
Thank you for your service.
The employees want to make sure that we express their gratitude to the Board of Education for taking this action this evening.
All in favor? First reading of policy 6410. Be it resolved that the Board of Education accept the first reading of the staff acceptable use policy 6410. Do I have a motion? Jen, second. Divya, any discussion? All in favor? Acceptance of first reading of policy 7222. Be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the first reading of the policy diploma and or credential options for students with disabilities. Do I have a motion? Sam, second. Jen, any discussion? I personally don't agree with this is a revision to a current policy. I personally don't agree with the changes made and the suggested changes made because I feel that it's important to be able to have flexibility to give a student the opportunity for success and do what a student with disability or any student that we have flexibility to provide them with what's in their best interest.
We always have that flexibility. This is a board policy. The board can change this policy on any time it wants. So any petition made for this would go to the board. The board could vote to say, yes, we want to allow this student to do whatever it is the student wants to do, and that's all this policy is doing is reflecting, a board decision.
Right, but I think that you can keep the policy the way it is and be in the same position, in a better position, that you don't have to actually change a policy to make a decision that's what's right for a student.
Well, it's not changing a policy, it's just making an exception to the policy. So who would make the decision?
The board.
You're saying you don't want this policy, which makes it, who's making the
The policy
decision?
exists, I just don't agree with the changes, the suggested changes in the policy.
So what do the suggested changes do that you don't like?
That it says if and only if meets the graduation requirements.
So then you're saying we should relax the graduation requirements?
No, I'm saying we should keep the policy as is, so we have the flexibility to do what's right for a student.
Well, we still have that flexibility. There's nothing about this policy that takes away that flexibility. This policy just clarifies graduation requirements. That's, I
Well, I
don't
think the
understand.
graduation requirements don't need clarification, I think they're clear.
Then who's gonna make the decision on the exceptions? That's what I don't understand. Like, you're saying that you don't want them to have graduation requirements, so who's waiving the graduation requirements?
No, it's not, it only reflects to whether they're allowed to walk at graduation, and either if whoever makes the decision, if the superintendent makes it or we make it, I'd like to keep the flexibility there.
But flexibility, that's what I'm trying to say, the flexibility to do what? The board always has the flexibility to make the decision, so what flexibility are you looking for?
I like the policy the way it is.
But I'm trying to understand, what is the new policy? To me, the new policy is simply saying that it's a board decision, that the board has the ability to dictate who is graduating or participating in graduation or participating in graduation activities. Who should make that decision if not the board?
I would argue the people who know that student the best. The superintendent is privy to all of that student's records, as is probably the, Kim, or that department.
But again, this is saying who is a graduate of Jericho High School. We are the ones elected with the responsibility to ordain or qualify someone or say this person is now a graduate of Jericho High School. I'm not sure why the board should want to push that responsibility or give up that responsibility. That's our responsibility is to guarantee the I don't want to say sanctity because that's an overstatement, but the words are just failing me right now. That this is a graduate. So, as I said, this isn't restricting anything to the board. The board, the district can do whatever they want. This is just saying it's a board decision. And I just thought the language was a bit unclear as to whose responsibility that is or whose power that is. And I think all those powers should rest with the board. It's not that the as you said, the PPS people, of course they know the student better than the board member would in most cases. Of course, the principal of that school would know the student better. Perhaps even the superintendent would know that student better. But there's a whole bunch of issues that this board deals with where other people know the situation better. They come to the board and say, this is what we recommend. The board decides, yes, that is the right answer. No, that's the wrong answer. The way the wording was before, it was sort of, as you rightly point out, very unclear as to whose decision that is. And I think anything having to do with graduation, anything to do with us or the school district saying, yes, you are a graduate of Jericho High School, or you are participating as a graduate or a presumed graduate of Jericho High School, that's clearly a board decision. That's our responsibility to protect the integrity of the brand. I think we've got a nod of agreement from someone in the audience. So that's what I don't understand what you're saying. It's not taking away any flexibility. It's not abrogating the responsibility of the board. And it's certainly letting the board listen to everybody who knows that student or students better than the individual board members. Everything we talk about, we very rarely know anything that we don't know. We just hired Melissa Lee. We don't know her as well as Mr. Manuel does or Mr. Grishman does. But they said, this is the person we want as our the assistant superintendent for finance and business affairs. And that's what it is. So I'm not sure how this is any different. I don't even understand what you're saying, because nothing that you're saying is taking away from the wording of this policy, other than clarifying that it's the board's responsibility.
I don't actually read that. It says the board, it says provided, and it's giving restrictions that before the superintendent gets to consider something, it has to do this or this. So I don't see how that even clarifies that it's a board decision. You're just putting restrictions on what the superintendent gets to do. That's the way it's written.
No, I think that you're misunderstanding.
Well, that's
If
what
it's
it
a board, no,
says.
if it's a,
Provided the student, one, has done this, or has done this, then the superintendent will consider. So there, in no way does that sentence say that's a board.
Mr. Steve, and I apologize, I forgot your last name. I mean, am I correct in saying that a board policy that states A or B can only be changed or exempted by board action?
You would need, in order for board policy to allow for board action, you would have to write that there's leeway to what your board policy is. You have to read as says, whatever it
So
says.
what would you add to that, then, to say that? That the board can waive this at any time?
I mean, and just, Mr. Perlman, just so I can just clarify, I read it also just to be very restricting without any leeway to the board. If you want to do that, you would have to add, notwithstanding in the event that students can petition to the board in the event that these things have not occurred. Again, this is just very.
That's fine, I have no problem with that.
And that would give the board the ability, in the event that they don't have A or B, to be able to come to the board and say, hey, these are the reasons why I want to do this. Will you consider?
I have no problem with that. I'd be happy to add that language. And I think that's a great suggestion by Mrs. Citron and Mr. Steve, that, and I apologize, I wasn't, I tuned out.
That's okay.
Good staff.
Good staff.
Good staff.
Good staff.
Good stat.
I wish we had some good stats. We should get some money.
I think we have pretty good stats.
Related to
Um,
stats.
So,
Maybe, I don't know.
I'm writing that down, so I don't forget the next 15 minutes.
I gave you my card.
You did, but I put it away. Same place. No, so all I'm saying is that it should be a board decision, not passed down, certainly as you pointed out, to PPS or something like that, about who's participating and who's graduating from Jericho High School. I think that's the integrity of the brand, and any confusion about what goes on there. And so Mr. Goodstad's suggestion, I'd happily add that and say, I take that if that alleviated Dr. Balachander's or Mrs. Citron's concern. But other than that, I'm not quite sure when you say it's taking away the flexibility, if you add in Mr. Goodstad's suggestion, it's basically saying, okay, fine, now the board has complete flexibility, but really, we want to tell people, you're graduating from Jericho High School if you've met these criteria. I mean, I think that, to me, that's black or white. If you want to make exceptions, go ahead.
Graduating is different than, I mean, as we know, is, walking in a ceremony could be, and it doesn't necessarily, there could be an exception made.
Of course, I think the board should be able to make that exception, as Mr. Bissett pointed out.
Or Mr. Superintendent, as you call him, should be able to make that too.
Okay, maybe that's where we're disagreeing. I do not
But the way
believe-
the language is, it doesn't say that either.
I agree, I don't think this policy reflects that intention, so personally.
What I'm saying, I'm trying to say, so explain that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I take all those points. So here, let me, so it doesn't sound like Dr. Foresto has said, and you disagree with this policy, but you disagree with the concept that the board, not someone else in the school district, should decide who graduates or who walks in graduation? Or do you think that shouldn't be a board decision?
Well, I think it's currently a board decision,
No, not the way this policy is written.
but I'm looking at the marked up policy with the changes. I think,
The marked up policy, yes, it is a board decision. That's why,
Yeah, no,
my
okay, that's
intention was
what-
to make it, my intention was to make it a board decision, not a someone else in the school district decision.
I mean,
I
I
don't
agree
know
with
why-
him, but my feeling is that it should be the superintendent's decision, and if someone disagrees, they can appeal to the board, like most other decisions having to do with students. That's how most things are, the superintendent or, people that report to him make the decision, and then if someone disagrees, they can appeal to the board.
I make a motion to move into executive session. That's the only way to solve this problem.
But how is this
You know
considered?
why, but that's fine.
But you're talking about a policy.
Yep.
That's not specific to a student.
No, it's not specific to students, you're right. Again, under the existing policy, who gets to decide who graduates or walks in graduation?
The superintendent.
Okay.
Who decides who graduates
It's
is,
different.
who decides who graduates is within the state education department and within commissioners. So again, a kid who meets the requirements that is set by the New York State Education Department, not by the superintendent, not by the Board of Education.
Can we have more stringent requirements in New York State?
You could.
So we could. So we could have more stringent, we could put in a requirement that every student needs to be run a 5-minute mile to graduate from Jericho High
And
School.
can never have worn a hoodie.
Or again, if you want to look at academics, a student must have 4 years of science in order to earn a high school diploma.
Exactly. So if we were to have that, who would be able to waive that, superintendent or the board?
I would say so, student would appeal that to the Commissioner of Education.
I mean, technically, there are many different types of diplomas, they grow by the day. I think
And they're continuing.
I think at first it was 3, now we're up to 11, and I think I might be missing. So, I mean, and it's still the capability of a local diploma, which is whatever the district wants. With regards to Regents diplomas, it's very specific as to what you need. You can't add something on top of a Regents diploma. Regents, if I'm eligible to graduate with a Regents diploma, I get to graduate with a Regents diploma. I don't have to meet all the other requirements, like 5-minute mile or wearing a hoodie or any of that stuff. But generally speaking, if the kid was not eligible to graduate, I mean, there's a process probably in your policy. I don't know which one off the top of my
This
head.
is a policy.
No, this is a policy regarding the diploma for students with disabilities.
Okay, got it.
There's obviously a different instructional policy in your 8000s. I don't know which one off the top of my head that talks about your graduation requirements for general ed students. So obviously this is, and actually I think the provision that we're discussing right now is not graduation itself, but the participation in graduation, which
Sure.
is a different thing.
Okay.
That is
So,
what we're discussing.
generally speaking,
Well, why would someone participate in graduation if they haven't graduated?
the difference, there are some students who may be part of a cohort in which they're, again, as I discussed previously in regarding special education settlements, special education students are eligible to attend school up until they're 21, 23 because of COVID for a couple of years. So there may be kids who have gone up through the process with their cohort and then continue on in school past their 18 years. They may not technically graduate with enough credits to graduate, but they've been with a group of people for their entire school career. And they may want to graduate with those people, even though they're technically may not have a sufficiency of credits to graduate at that point in time.
Okay, then that's a fine example, so then I would argue that in that case, that should be a board decision, not a administration decision, whether it be PPS, building principal, or superintendent, that person participated in that. That's all I'm trying to say. So any language that gets to, and if people disagree with that concept, that's fine, and we'll vote it down, but my simple concept here is that if, as Mr. Goodstad explained, if someone's walking with their cohort, that should be a board decision, given that it is, again, going to the graduation process call, not the graduation process, that should be a board decision, not an administration decision. Because I don't believe in the all-powerful administration. I think anything dealing with people participating in something as serious as graduation should be a board decision.
I disagree, and I think it should be like other decisions that we make, that the superintendent makes the decision, and if someone has a problem with it, they could appeal to the board, and I feel like.
But that's not what this policy says, it can't be appealed to the board.
And,
It can't be appealed to the, that's not what this policy says.
But most policies don't have a specific provision, appeal to the board, and when someone has an issue with something that they don't like, they appeal to the board, so it's not like every policy says.
Basically,
You
here's
could
the
appeal to
thing,
the board.
absolutely, okay, so we're not talking about the appeal to the board, but we're saying that you're now saying that the head of PBS can say, this person should be allowed to graduate
Well,
their
it
cohort.
would be, it would be Hank's
So,
decision,
yeah,
but you
so-
would take
so
the
Steve-
recommendation from.
Steve points out, again, something that I think is fairly industry standard, that a student with an IEP who chooses to walk with his cohort in most districts is permitted to move and to attend with his cohort, even though he's coming back for potentially another 2 or now 3 years.
And I have no problem with that idea. I just believe, and the reason that I thought this policy was missing some is, I believe that should be a board decision, not an administration decision. Because I don't believe that type of decision should be vested in one person. I think that should be vested in the board, because again, this is someone who is, whatever it is, participating in, and we're spending way too much time on this. It's who's putting themselves forward potentially as a graduate of the school. And I think that is a board decision, not an individual decision.
But that would be a material misrepresentation of their participation in the graduation exercise. If they're only walking and not receiving a diploma, they're not a graduate. They walked, but short of that, they did not.
I'm not gonna talk about misrepresenting. Here we're talking about special needs kids, so
I understand.
I'm not even arguing that there's misrepresentation or anything like that. I just believe that decisions like this should be board level decisions, not individual decisions. And that's it. So let's just vote. We'll vote it. You guys, 3 of you want to vote it down, we'll vote it down. But I still don't understand. I haven't taken away any flexibility. I haven't taken away anything, and we just disagree on the concept here. And that's fine.
I don't know if it's even an individual decision per se, because, Hank's not gonna make that decision without the input of many people.
Yeah.
But to me, that's not an input type of decision. That's a board decision. It's not input, it's a board decision. It's like, we wouldn't change graduation or participation in graduation requirements. We wouldn't let some individual waive that, so I'm not sure why we're letting them waive this. This doesn't make any sense to me. That's fine.
Well, I think I agree with you that we should move to a vote. I think everyone knows how they feel, not everyone said how they feel, but I think. So all in favor of accepting the first, so Chris, so if we accept the first,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
You need business card too?
Steve Powers.
I went to one district in which I had placed the attorney who normally goes, and they just referred to me as not Mike.
Well, but we have another Chris right here.
That's
too.
This conversation is so insincere. It's just,
Why are you getting so hostile?
because it's an insincere conversation.
But we disagree, why can't we disagree and
Because it's
still
an
not be?
insincere conversation.
Okay, you can think that, but I think that we're all getting along and you
This has
have an
nothing to do
opinion,
with getting along.
we have a
Just saying
difference of
it's
an
insincere.
opinion, so why are you,
Absolutely.
who's being insincere?
So can
You.
could we?
Being insincere?
Yeah. Can we
I
just
have
move to a
an
vote?
opinion,
Can we
that's
just move
different
to a
from
vote?
yours, so that
Table
makes
it,
me
discuss it in exec as you had wanted, and then put it on next month's agenda?
But it's not, it's,
You
I don't,
have to explain them.
what?
Nothing.
I think we should table this conversation.
Okay, so we make a motion to table.
motion to table this, policy reading.
Okay. All in favor? Okay, we'll table it.
And then we can discuss it. Makes sense.
This everyone can clear it.
Did everyone approve the
Yes.
table?
Acceptance of the first reading of policy 8330. Be resolved that the Board of Education accept the first reading of policy 8330, objection to instructional or other materials. Do I have a motion? Jen, second, Sam, any discussion?
This again was just meant to clarify the conversation we had 2 months ago.
I don't have a problem with the concept of the policy. I have a problem with, and I think the original policy is missing this concept also. There is a chain of command, and I would like to add a provision after the first paragraph sentence, it's a one sentence paragraph, that, I don't write any language, but to say that, something about following the chain of command.
So after, get something to the effect of, after the chain of command has been exhausted,
Or if there's some,
if there's no
if there's some significant reason why there is
if there's no resolution through the chain of command.
No, but I get that there could be a situation where someone might feel uncomfortable going exactly through the chain of command, so there could be the flexibility to say, if there's a significant reason, with, an explanation why the chain of command is not followed.
So this is just a recommendation. It's follow the chain of command.
Right, that's why I wanna add,
If you feel
I wanna
that,
add a provision, a sentence that says something about, after exhausting the chain of command, or,
but it says, however, a student may choose.
right, so this is saying, without adding what I wanna add, you're saying you just can totally skip, just for any reason at all, you could just skip the chain of command, and I wanna encourage going to the chain of command first.
And from my perspective, I would want to mandate that if you're uncomfortable with the first step in the chain of command, you can move to the second or third step, but from my perspective, I would still like there to be discussions with school staff, and whether that starts at the teacher or the curriculum associate or the principal, but at some place that there is discussion before we get into any kind of committee activity.
I'd like to see something just indicating the first step in this process should be, an honest conversation with the classroom teacher, because.
Well, that is the chain of command.
It is the chain of command, but just maybe even specifying that more clearly, because the chain of command is not,
I don't know if the chain of command changes by building, but we can.
but it's
we can
not
list that.
specified, the actual chain of command. I mean, like a table of organization would typically show
Right,
it.
but the calendar has, we could refer to the chain of command, it is a published
We can
document.
refer to that then,
Yeah.
but, that's not specified explicitly in this policy, because I do think that, the first point of contact should be the classroom teacher. I acknowledge for some reason, perhaps somebody's not comfortable doing that, in which case, things could be escalated, but I think we need to remind people that that's the most effective way to get things done. They know your child the best. Presumably your relationship with them is, you have the closest relationship with the child's individual teacher.
But
So, yeah.
Are we restricting parents, let's just say a parent goes and has a conversation with the teacher, or the student has a conversation with the teacher, they don't necessarily get the response maybe that they were looking for, or they still feel,
They go
Then
up
they
the
go
chain.
That's
can
within
they,
your rights to
are
take
they
it to the next-
restricted to go up the chain?
That's what
They
this is.
spoke to the teacher, they got the answer, in the teacher's view, it's
Now they should be
sufficient.
going to the teacher supervisor to
Okay,
continue the conversation.
okay, but so it's not restricting them to move up.
No, they
No,
should,
it's encouraging
you're
them.
supposed, you have to move up, you have
If
to
you-
follow the
if
chain of
you're-
command, then you go to the superintendent after you've exhausted the chain
The
of
purpose
command.
of the chain of command.
Can you write
It's
something?
not satisfied, it's not satisfied at this level, goes to the next level. It's not
You're
satisfied
not
at that level,
satisfied, okay.
it goes to the next
So
level.
we
You're not
should add that
satisfied at that level.
language.
Right.
It's
that's what I
an
wanted to do.
escalation policy,
Yes.
so.
First of all, it's not chain of command, because that's sort of, I think, the wrong word. Second of all, we're not talking about classroom issues here. We're talking about problems with instructional material. It's different. I agree with you wholeheartedly. A student has a problem with a teacher, a student has a problem with a grade, with a behavior, with a punishment, with something like that. I fully agree with you. take it to the teacher, if it doesn't work with the teacher, you can go to the building principal, the
So
principal.
give me the example,
Here we're
Sam.
talking about, we can, I mean, I'm not trying to, stir
I
up
think
people.
you're saying you
I'm not sure some
disagree
things,
with my
here I think
comment.
instructional material is a slightly different.
The teacher chooses the instructional material. The kid should have the conversation with the teacher regarding the instructional material. Ms. Jones, in today's lesson, you used this example or this reading. Can we talk about it? I was uncomfortable with it.
And
That's
I think,
instructional material.
and I think there you're putting a burden on a 15 or 16 or 17-year-old that doesn't belong on them.
Then mom had, frankly, in the chain of command, more often than not, it's the parent, not the student.
Okay, so then it's not the student, so now you want the parent to be involved.
Correct.
Again,
I'm
we're not
looking to
talking about a
resolve,
problem in the classroom, we're talking about instructional material, and I think.
which
it's
is
a
chosen
basic
by the
question.
teacher.
Like I said, that's fine. I mean, it's, again, I don't,
I'm looking to resolve issues, Sam, at the simplest level.
100%.
So a teacher is using a piece of material that makes a kid uncomfortable. I want the kid or the parent to have that conversation with the teacher to say, you used a piece of material that because of my heritage made me uncomfortable.
and
That's
nothing in this policy is discouraging that, is limiting that.
doesn't stay.
What it's doing, it's mandating that, and that's the part I have a problem. I have a problem mandating that if, for whatever reason, and I can't tell you the reason, because what I'm saying is that if you're mandating that, as opposed to, if someone has an issue, yes, they usually try to work it out, and
My
we will go do
suggestion
it.
was to say, go through the chain of command unless you have a significant reason not to go through the
What if
chain
we
of
soften
command.
the
Sam,
language?
when I get a phone call over an issue, my first conversation is, so have you discussed that with Ms. Jones?
Sure.
Or have you discussed that with your building principal? So before I'm willing to take it on, I'm directing the parent to the chain of command.
Okay, let's just, a little history for the people. I agree with 100%. I have never called you about a single teacher issue. I've never called the principal. I've never called the principal. My wife has never, okay, what we're talking about here, if we're going back, this all came about because we had a rowdy meeting a couple of months ago. And one of the issues that we had was, it was about a specific assignment that was given by a specific teacher. And part of the confusion that emanated from this was that there was a complaint that the teacher hadn't been addressed first. Now, whether or not that was valid, invalid, it was consistent with district policy. District policy said that, yes, we agree, the calendar says that if you have a problem, deal with this. The policy was, if you have a problem with instructional material, contact the superintendent. What then happened was, there was a long, long lag time between raising the issue with the superintendent and getting what someone felt was proper resolution. And for full disclosure, this was not me. And so all I was trying to do by doing this policy says, look, I don't want to change that. I want to add the language here saying, we really think your best idea is respectful communication between teachers, administration, parents, and students. So if we want to expand the first paragraph there about direct, open, and respectful communications, and say, look, we think you should go to the teacher, the curriculum associate, the building, what, I have no problem with that. The problem I have is that you are now mandating that they go to that, and I believe that that's 100% wrong, because for whatever reason, I can't tell you why someone's gonna be uncomfortable talking to the teacher. They may be worried that it's 2 weeks before the end of the semester and it's gonna affect their grade. They may be concerned that they've already had 2 conversations about instructional material and they've gotten nowhere with the teacher.
But I made that suggestion that you go through the chain of command unless you have a valid reason.
Why don't we just soften it and say parents, students and parents are encouraged to first converse with the classroom teacher, and then beyond that,
Follow the
Follow the chain of command.
Yeah.
follow
That's
the
fine.
calendar.
instead of mandate and choose not to, I mean, just soften it. What's that?
There should be no.
No, I think
mandating.
that we should be encouraged. I mean, if you choose to not speak with the classroom teacher for some reason, I hope it's a good reason, then you can, take it to the next level, and that would be the building principal, the assistant principal,
Or the curriculum
or the
associate.
curriculum associate.
That's fine.
But I think we should
That's all
strongly.
we're saying.
We should- But I think we just need to say it, we can get past this, but I think we need to encourage.
Write something.
Okay, but I don't think it's if you have a good reason, because then you're just gonna argue over what the reason is.
Right,
It's like,
yeah, it shouldn't
that-
be.
that's my
I'm
problem.
great, I mean, I.
Leave it open-ended,
I hear
strongly encourage.
That's it, I know,
That's- I
that's all we're with, I just didn't like the suggestion before.
Steve,
And I just wanna ask,
I had just written a policy for another school district on this exact issue. The policy in that district, has the first level actually be the building principal and not the teacher. Actually, I think for the similar reasons to what Dr. Fressa just said about, or not Dr. Fressa, someone talked about, Mr. Promi
Yeah.
said it, about potential retribution from the teacher and stuff like that. So the principal be the first level. The
Oh, yeah,
assistant-
not retribution,
Yeah, I
the
would
fear
argue-
of retribution, I would never say that our teachers are gonna, have any retribution
And
for
by
fear.
here, because of our structure, I probably would blend in the curriculum associate.
Of course.
Who's in this district initially responsible for instructional material.
well,
Why don't we work
Yeah.
on the policy you developed and make it, and we'll bring a first reading back.
So I'm not
in
concerned
September.
about retribution, I think
I'm not
in most cases, if a teacher became aware that a
Fear.
student or a parent was offended or in any way upset by a lesson, they'd probably be just as upset, so it's.
and then I just wanna ask, I mean, I don't know if it's, is 14 days and 30 days, are those reasonable numbers?
Why don't we come back with a recommendation, Steve and central office?
I mean, I try to set it at the longer limit, because like I said, I think you have a standing committee, but I wanted to give it time, but again, the problem we had a couple months ago was this went on for 2 or 3 months. And 2 or 3 months sort of becomes too long, because at that point, you're done with the semester, you're done with the course, you're done with the year. You just want to move along.
Okay, I make a motion to table this for the next meeting. Okay, all in favor? Now to be raised in property taxes, school purposes. Whereas the voters of the district adopted the 22-23 budget of $130,073,339. Be it resolved that the amount to be raised in property taxes will be $108,811,962. Be it further resolved that all board members sign the attached Town of Board Survey and North Hempstead tax warrant on behalf of the school district. Do I have a motion? Jen, second. Chris?
Well, Can't we just talk about this?
Well,
Like, because it's- I understand.
we do the motions and then
Oh, I
next
thought you
thing
were
any
taking a vote,
discussion.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Chris, you second?
Sure.
Okay, any discussion? Do you want, Victor, you wanna do the next one?
Sure. We closed the books at the end of the year. We had a healthy surplus. Also looking at challenges in next year, the coming year, inflation, health insurance premiums, teachers' retirement system, employees' retirement system are all kind of headwinds that we're all concerned about. With that said, the 1.95% levy that was approved back in May by the voters, this brings it down to a flat tax levy, a zero tax levy increase for the 22-23 school year.
Victor, we appreciate your making that recommendation to the board. We know that not an easy recommendation to make, but one that is incredibly sensitive to the taxpayers of the school district, and appreciate the difficult recommendation that you made.
Thank you for the hard work and the effort to get this down to no tax increase for most people.
So there's no tax increase on our end, but we can't control what the county charges. Cause that is not, we
The
don't.
way they
we don't-
split the pie, yeah, we can't control that.
There
So
are-
That's based-
someone's
that's based on
taxes, some
assessments.
people's taxes still could be increased, but it has
I
nothing to
said
do
for
with us.
most people.
Your neighbor could pay zero and pay,
10%.
Yeah.
I mean, there are years that there are individual properties where the people are paying less taxes.
Yeah.
And they're on a year of a zero, and there are years that some people are increasing by 10%, which we need to make clear. We set a tax levy of zero. Any change or
Tax
anything that's
levy
different.
increase of zero, not a tax levy of zero.
Increase of zero. Any change to your individual taxes is set by the town of Oyster Bay.
And we will ask Denise to properly
Yeah.
put this information out.
And all in favor? 12722 through U345. Do I have a motion? Ben, second. Chris, any discussion?
Yes.
I have-
On ID 12681, it's the signature, who is the budget review administrator who's signing all this? I can't read the signature. It's the second schedule.
12681.
Yes, the budget review administrator, that's your signature? Oh, okay. No problem. ID 12671 and 12672. What is the reason for the big decline from 2021-22 to 22-23?
So
Nassau BOCES went down by $1.3 million?
So the, when you do the initial contract with BOCES, it does not count what we eventually give them as part of our budget for computer purchases that we do probably in April or May to set up for the following summer and the following school year. That doesn't show up in the initial contract. So we would do, at that point, we would increase the LOI for those budgeted items.
So if I back that out, is our BOCES payment pretty much similar from 21-22 to 22-23?
21, 20, if you back out the technology, I mean, I'm not gonna say there are other,
But at least
that's the,
around that same
that's the
57,
material,
58.
that's the material item.
Got it. Okay, on IT, I'm sorry, on ID 12695, disposition of assets, the third line item there is missing the description, it's sort of,
Yeah, it says
is not
nine.
nine or
It says
something?
nine.
Yeah,
I sent that to
I
you.
changed it though.
I sent that to you earlier.
I
Yeah, we
changed it.
changed
It was Earth Science books.
What?
It was
Earth
Earth Science
Science
books.
Good science. The next schedule, I'm sorry, 12699, transportation contracts. All of these contracts, and I feel like I asked this last year, begin on
I
September
have the same
1st,
question.
but we have school on the 29th, are we paying extra?
We are currently not paying extra, we haven't in the past, and we are not this year.
But they're showing up on the 29th.
I'm sorry, they're showing up.
They're showing up on the
And whatever
29th.
protections we have, liability,
Yes,
starting on the
yes.
9th, we have on the 29th,
Yes.
starting on the.
I can't guarantee that that will continue in the future if we open early and there's not gonna be an additional truck.
Fuel load.
Can I ask a question on
No,
that
it's
same,
already been-
that same schedule, Sam?
Yes, of course.
On the transportation contract,
I'm sorry?
who is Laidlaw? I thought our only transportation company was First Student.
Yeah, Laidlaw is actually the parent company of First Student.
First student bought Laidlaw, no?
The opposite?
Yeah, I think.
So why?
I don't know,
so both your
the contract's
contracts were sold.
still,
It's
will fall under Laidlaw.
later. So first, my understanding is First Student bought Laidlaw, so First Student owns Laidlaw, but that is still the legal subdivision we deal with.
Yeah, I think Laidlaw was the original bid, from years ago that we continue to extend. So we have to keep it that way.
You no longer see Laidlaw buses, they're all First Student buses.
Right, that's it. What's the, in the schedule of, high school function, there's a high service function and clubs, and some of them look like they could be saying, like, some of them are like student council, but then there's like French club, so there's a different salary rates, they're separated by service function and club.
You're talking about the
It might be
personnel
a-
schedule?
Maybe a Ben question.
Yeah.
The personnel schedule.
So you look, most of the clubs have the same rate, okay?
Yes.
The service functions, yeah, they're significantly more, and clubs have a fixed amount of time, usually 15 sessions, a club. But a service function goes the whole year, that's the difference.
Anyone else have any schedule questions? No? Okay. All in favor? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Ben, second? Vivian, so all in favor?
Democrats vote next 10 days, and then you can vote for George afterwards. I'm saying, just go out and vote, I didn't say who to vote, we'll just vote.